Hey friends, tonight let's explore a secret history that starts not in a castle or battlefield, but in a smoky earthen kitchen tucked behind a thatched hut. It smells faintly of ash and something sweet like milk and flour left too long on a warm stone. We're heading into the world of medieval pancakes. Yes, pancakes. Soft folded, bubbling like gossip on a market morning. But don't get too excited, you might not survive the church fines. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to comment where you're listening from and what time you decided to fall asleep to medieval batter. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are sitting near a cook fire, not yours, but someone's mother's friend's fire borrowed for the hour before dawn. The rest of the hamlet sleeps except for the hens, which are already complaining. Your hands are sticky with flour, and the pan, a flattened iron plate once part of a broken plow, is warming over embers. You're making something forbidden. You whisper the recipe like a prayer. Coarse ground barley, a splash of goat milk egg if you can steal one. A pinch of herbs if the garden is merciful. Maybe a scrap of old honeycomb for sweetness. You mix it all with your fingers and pour it into the pan. It hisses, then quiets, forming a pale circle of soft rebellion. These aren't breakfast treats, they're resistance. During certain feast days or religious fasts, eating animal products, milk, eggs, even butter was strictly forbidden. And yet here you are making a pancake in the shadows. Why? Because your body is cold and hungry. Because a boiled root doesn't taste like home. Because pancakes, for all their fluff and comfort, carry memory. Tonight's historical fact: by the 13th century, many parts of Europe were enforcing religious fasts with fines, penance, or public shame. Eating rich food on the wrong day could land you on a list, especially if the priest caught wind. But peasants often bent the rules. They fried forbidden batter in secret, calling them by fake names like flatbread for St. Mildred or mooncakes. One odd detail: some pancake recipes called for crushed rose petals or tree bark, not just for flavor, but to disguise the smell of illicit butter. If someone passed by, they might think you were making incense. Sneaky, no. So here's the academic head tilt. Were medieval fast day violations truly acts of rebellion, or simply survival in the face of rules made by people who never missed a meal? Some scholars argue the church understood and tolerated small breaches, while others suggest local informants made a meal of tattling on their neighbors. You flip your pancake. It lands with a soft thud, steaming slightly. The scent curls up into the rafters like a ghost of breakfast future. Your stomach growls, but you wait. You always wait. That's part of the ritual. Nearby, a child stirs. Maybe they smell it too. You whisper a lullaby of batter and steam, hoping they fall back asleep. You take a bite. It's chewy, earthy, faintly sweet. The honeycomb has melted into amber veins. You close your eyes. For a moment, the church bells and tax collectors don't exist. Just you, a fire, and a food old enough to carry a secret. Fire crackles. In another part of the village, a dog barks at the wind. You gather your things, scrape the last bits of pancake from the pan, douse the coals, wrap the plate in burlap. It's still dark. Your feet crunch on frost. But you've eaten. You've stolen a moment of softness in a world lined with rules. And that, dear listener, is how pancakes became quietly powerful. You wake to the sound of something sizzling. Not birdsong or bells, but the faint crackle of batter on iron. It's still dark outside, the sort of medieval twilight when everything looks slightly haunted and potatoes haven't yet been invented. You shuffle from the hay pile you called a bed, drawn toward the scent like some kind of breakfast moth. The source: a squat woman in a woolen hood is crouched over a fire, carefully ladling something onto a flat black stone. The batter hisses. She glances at you and winks. Her expression says, "This isn't technically allowed, so let's not shout about it." You nod in sleepy solidarity. Pancakes, medieval pancakes. Not the fluffy towers you might find in a modern brunch cafe, but more like crepes, thin, uneven, cooked with lard instead of butter, and sweetened only by hope, or maybe a bit of crushed apple. These were secret things often cooked at odd hours or during Lent, when indulgence was technically forbidden. But people being people made pancakes anyway, in secret corners, in early dawn. You sit beside her, feeling the fire crackle against your cheeks. She hands you one, folded into quarters, the inside still steaming. It tastes like grain, like smoke, and just a whisper of honey. Nothing fancy, everything perfect. Here's the common truth of the night medieval pancakes were real, and they were everywhere. Nearly every culture had their own version wheat flour, where possible oat or rye were not, maybe an egg, maybe not. What they all shared was heat hunger and improvisation. The weirder fact, in some records, pancakes were used as bribes. Not coins, not favors. Just a flat piece of fried dough offered to a watchman, a clerk, even a priest. A peace offering made of pantry scraps. You imagine someone slipping a slightly burnt oat cake to a village scribe and whispering, "Forget you saw me sneaking meat last Friday." There's a quiet academic debate about whether these pancakes count as protest or just plain stubbornness. Was it culinary resistance to strict fasting laws, or simply the result of a collective sweet tooth that didn't take orders from bishop scholars? Disagree. The pancakes, meanwhile, are long gone. The woman tells you her name is Lise. She was a washerwoman in the next town, but the river changed course and took half the laundries with it. Now she wanders from village to village, trading warm cakes for gossip. She says pancakes are the perfect currency, hot, edible, and gone before anyone can prove anything. You help her clean up. The pan is wiped with straw. The ashes are buried. No trace remains but the smell on your clothes and the sweetness clinging to your teeth. Later that morning, you pass a stone chapel with windows made of horn. The priest is already up swinging incense and muttering Latin. He looks stern. He probably smells the lard on you. You quicken your step. On a low stone fence, a boy is selling yesterday's bread, stuffed with something that might be pickled turnip, or might be regret. You buy one and chew carefully. It fights back. You swallow. It wins. As the road twists through fields and frost, you think about how the smallest comforts, a warm cake, a shared moment, a stolen bite, linger longest. Maybe that's what makes pancakes so timeless. Not their ingredients, but their intent to bend the rules for joy. And maybe that's the lesson for today. History isn't always grand or terrible. Sometimes it's just a stolen pancake in the dark. By the time your second week in the fields begins, you're more straw than skin. Your hands are stiff from pulling nettles. Your back sings the mournful ballad of early peasantry, and your nose now detects the subtle difference between pig and goat before you even open the barn door. But today is a festival day. Not the big kind with saints and bells and roasted geese, but a small one, local, unrecorded, and maybe slightly made up. The kind of day when someone whispers, "We deserve something sweet." And so the pans come out. There isn't a kitchen, just a covered hearth at the edge of a clearing where flat stones hold up a soot-stained skillet. Someone has fetched eggs from the hen coop. Another has ground rye and oat flour coarsely with a handstone. You hear the splash of buttermilk being poured into a carved wooden bowl. The scent of smoke mixes with crushed herbs, maybe thyme or savory or wild onion. The pancakes are not round golden discs. No, these are rustic dollops somewhere between a flapjack and a miracle. Crispy at the edges, soft in the middle, slightly burned in spots but warmly defiant of the season's hardship. You take one with your fingers, blow on it, and bite. It tastes like hope. In the Middle Ages, pancakes weren't so much a food category as a celebration. Made from whatever was on hand, stale beer barley, mashed apples, or even thickened vegetable broth, they were cooked for feast days, and sometimes in secret when the church calendar forbade indulgence. Today's common historical fact: peasants did eat pancakes, especially during Shrovetide. It was a way to use up rich ingredients like eggs, milk, and fat before Lent. But outside of religious feasts, many villages created their own rituals, and pancakes became unofficial tokens of defiance. Your neighbor, the one with the limp and the excellent turnip patch, hands you a second pancake. This one has something unexpected inside: a bit of honeyed squash. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. "Gift from the priest's garden," he mutters, eyes twinkling. Here's your quirky detail: in some regions, peasants would write small prayers or riddles onto bits of parchment and bake them inside the pancake. Whoever found one had to solve it aloud or wash dishes. You bite carefully. No paper. You count that as a win. Now here's a question that keeps historians debating in dusty corners of the archives. Did peasants really treat food as ritual, or are we just romanticizing their hunger? Some scholars argue the pancake was just utility, a way to stretch ingredients and keep calories compact. Others say the social role of these gatherings, however informal, turned the humble pancake into a shared symbol of resistance and joy. You decide not to debate, not tonight. Instead, you help turn the batter. You smile as someone tries to flip a cake midair, and it lands with a loud plop in the ashes. Laughter peals out like wind chimes. Someone starts a song. Not in tune, not important. As the stars emerge, you sit back on a worn log, the taste of wild thyme and oats still on your tongue. One child offers you a pancake with a bug baked into the crust. You decline. They eat it anyway. Cheers erupt. This isn't about hunger, it's about comfort. Tomorrow, the Lord of the Manor might raise taxes, the church might announce another fast, the harvest might shrink. But tonight, there are pancakes and jokes and someone snoring already beside the goat pen. Your hands, though cracked, feel full. The coals dim. The last pancake is passed around, torn into uneven pieces, shared without ceremony. A prayer might be muttered, or maybe just a hiccup. You lay down on your straw mat, the taste still lingering. And in the moonlight, you think sometimes sweetness comes quietly. The mornings in the village are not so much peaceful as they are resigned. The roosters don't crow as if announcing a kingdom, but more like they're complaining about the damp. Smoke curls out of thatched roofs like thoughts from half-awake heads. And you stretch. Your bones feel older than the church tower, and that's before you even stand. You slip outside. The path is muddy with last night's rain, and some hens give you a side eye, scandalized by your existence. But you make your way to the common oven. Let's talk about that. Communal ovens. The village had one, maybe two, if the Lord was generous or the baker was greedy. Families brought their dough, marked their loaves with little symbols, a cross, a flower, a circle with dots, and trusted the local oven master not to mix them up. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes your bread came back slightly holier than usual because it was someone else's offering. But on some mornings there was another scent. Something thinner, sweeter, not exactly bread and not exactly cake. Someone was making pancakes. This wasn't a Shrove Tuesday thing. No, these were secret pancakes. Flat, hot cakes made with egg and barley flour, or buckwheat if someone's cousin had been trading over the hills. Fried quickly on an oiled skillet, eaten even faster. They were not officially banned, but they weren't quite proper either. And that brings us to today's historical fact. Peasants in medieval Europe had to follow strict rules about what foods could be cooked, when and how. Sumptuary laws didn't just govern clothes. They often extended to spices, meat, and even cooking methods. Fried food that was suspicious, associated with fairs, foreigners, and feasting. Not humble enough. Definitely not pious. The odd detail, pancakes show up in penitential texts. As in, if a woman makes cakes with too much honey during Lent, she must fast another day. You weren't sinning by flipping a pancake, but you might have to atone for flipping it with flair. So here's the question. Were secret pancakes a quiet rebellion? Or were they just practical, easier to cook than loaves faster, using up old flour and eggs before they spoiled? You watch a mother duck into the alley near the oven. She pulls something from her basket, unwraps a cloth, and glances around like she's about to commit a heist. But all she does is fry a cake on a tiny pan over embers right there against the stones. She gives half to her toddler and nibbles the rest with the speed of someone trying not to be seen by God or the bailiff. You nod politely. She nods back, crumbs in her shawl. Neither of you speaks. Pancakes are private. You pass by a crooked house where someone's frying something more ambitious, a stuffed pancake it smells like. Maybe with onion and sage. Maybe just wishful thinking. The scent swirls and disappears into the breeze like a medieval rumor. Further on, a boy sits with a flat rock on his lap, trying to press a batter disc onto it with a hot spoon. His hands are blackened from the fire. His eyes sparkle with mischief. Maybe he's pretending to be a monk, or maybe just a hungry genius. As you walk, you think about your own pancake memories. The ones you ate in the barn when nobody was looking. The ones flavored with honey that had somehow crystallized into sugar stones. The ones with nettle when nothing else was green. They weren't luxuries. They were little emergencies of joy. And now you crave one. Just a small, warm, illegal cake. You duck behind a hedge, pull out a flat pan from your pack, and with the grace of a forager priest, you cook. It sizzles. It smells like memory and mild rebellion. You eat it too fast. The rest of the day stretches ahead. But somehow it already feels better. Just you, a stolen moment, and a secret pancake. You wake up to the sound of distant clanging metal on wood, perhaps a cart with a squeaky wheel or a blacksmith up too early. Your back aches from the night before, and your straw pillow has decided to imitate a bundle of pine cones. But the smell, oh, the smell, pancakes. thick, eggy batter with a bit of barley flour and just a pinch of dried mint someone nearby is cooking. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and peek out the cracked shutters of the roadside inn. In the courtyard, a young stable boy is frying something in a blackened pan over a sleepy fire. He's humming a tune from the market stalls, and you spot the telltale sizzle of batter turning golden. Of course, it's not called a pancake here. It's a crackle or a flan, depending on where you are. Every village has its own name for what is essentially a bit of batter cooked on a flat surface. Some add chopped leeks, some throw in river fish, some daringly hide chopped apples inside. All delightful, all suspiciously pancake-like. You wander over and offer your assistance. The boy shrugs, then hands you a flat stick. It's flipping time. The pan's surface is uneven, warped by years of fire and stories. Your first flip lands half the pancake on the ground. The chickens are thrilled. So is the pig. Here's your historical fact of the morning. In the medieval period, pancakes weren't just breakfast food, they were part of fast day loopholes. On days when meat was forbidden, frying batter with herbs and fruit allowed people to feel indulgent without breaking the rules. Especially popular before Lent, these cakes were a way to use up eggs and dairy. Waste not, want not, and certainly not when chickens are involved. The odd detail, pancakes were sometimes made with bone marrow. Yes, bone marrow. The savory richness added depth, especially when fried in lard. It was like sneaking a little indulgence into the constraints of religious observance. Sweet sin in a skillet. And the scholarly curiosity for today, were medieval pancakes a folk food embraced by peasants, or did they trickle down from monastic kitchens experimenting with meatless delights? Recipes appear in noble cookbooks, but so do mentions in tax records of cake flour as a common item among field hands. You take a bite of the latest attempt, crispy on the outside, soft inside, with the faintest taste of wood smoke and wild chives. The boy grins. You grin back. This right here is the taste of a shared morning. And yes, it's slightly burned, but so are you after a week on the road. As you chew, you remember stories from your uncle's farm about pancake races. Not real races, of course, but contests held in the village square before Lent. Each runner had a pan and a cake. The goal: reach the church without dropping your pancake. The prize: honor and maybe a second cake. And yes, people did drop them. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes to dogs. You sit on the edge of a barrel and enjoy the silence. Or at least the village version of silence: roosters arguing philosophy, goats being dramatic, someone yelling about turnips. But all of it buffered by the warmth in your stomach. Nearby, a woman carries a tray of dried fruits dipped in barley syrup, another pre-fast indulgence. You trade half a cake for a fig. Not a bad deal. You both nod the universal language of good breakfast diplomacy. The smell draws more people. Two monks appear, debating something Latin and lofty, but they accept pancakes with thanks. One insists on a drizzle of vinegar. It's a personal heresy, but he claims it sharpens the spirit. The other adds crushed lavender eyes, closed in what might be prayer or pancake bliss. Eventually, you stand, stretch, and wipe batter off your sleeve. The road calls, and it's hard to be sad with a warm pancake in your hand and crumbs of history in your pocket. By midday, the sun is kind but persistent. You walk past hedgerows and little altars carved into tree trunks. Every now and then, someone has left offerings, bits of bread, herbs, even a dried fish or two. You wonder how many of those little altars have seen pancakes. Probably more than one. By the time you reach the next hilltop, your satchel is lighter and your heart a bit fuller. There's something about pancakes. They're temporary, delicate, but remembered. Just like the villagers who made them. You imagine 1,000 quiet kitchens, 1,000 sunrises, all marked with sizzling pans and laughter. Tonight you might dream of batter and fire, or you might just dream of home, where your grandmother once cooked something very similar on a rainy afternoon. But for now, you walk belly full, soul soft, and the ghost of mint still clinging to your breath. You wake to the crackling of a low fire and the smell of something warm, earthy, and just slightly sweet. No, it's not pancakes, not yet. But it's the scent of soaked barley and dried apple slices simmering in a blackened pot, tended by a man with a crooked nose and a hat made from what looks suspiciously like a rabbit. You're in a peasant hut temporarily. The owner has let you sleep by the hearth in exchange for helping turn the compost heap yesterday. Fair trade, especially now as he ladles out a spoonful of barley apple mash into your wooden bowl and slides over a thick hunk of rye crust to soak it up. It's breakfast, but barely. Still, it warms the chest and keeps your legs moving. As you eat, he tells you about the festival. It's not a holy day, not exactly. It's a local thing, the kind that drapes ribbons from tree limbs and inspires people to wear shirts they haven't worn since last midsummer. There's music, of course. And somewhere between the dance and the beer, there will be the pancakes. Ah, yes, the pancakes. You try not to look too eager. Because you see, in this century, pancakes are a treat, especially in the fields. They're not the fluffy stacks you know from diners. These are thin crisp at the edges, fried on an iron plate smeared with goose fat. They might be made with a bit of wheat if you're lucky, but often it's barley rye or even mashed peas to stretch the batter. And the flavor's savory, sometimes like onion and thyme, or sweetened with dried pear bits and drizzled with a thin honey sauce. The secret is in the hiding, because technically these feasts aren't always sanctioned. Lent might be over, or it might not. The church calendar varies depending on who you ask. So when you see a group of neighbors suddenly burst into song and begin flipping pancakes behind a barn, it's either a celebration or a very well-rehearsed denial. Historical fact of the night. During the medieval period, pancakes were associated with feast days like Shrove Tuesday. Now Pancake Day in some places where people used up eggs, fats, and flours before Lent began. These thin cakes were both symbolic and practical, turning pantry remnants into something festive. Odd detail, some towns outlawed unauthorized frying during certain fasts. That's right, there were frying police. They wouldn't arrest you for theft, but fry something fragrant during Lent, and suddenly you're a culinary outlaw. The smell alone could draw the church warden. Here's tonight's academic twist. Were these secret pancakes a form of resistance? Some scholars suggest that peasant feasts, especially hidden ones, were subtle protests using food joy and smell to reclaim bodily autonomy from the austere demands of religious hierarchy. You ponder this as a girl with twin braids bursts into the hut, cheeks red from the wind. She carries a bundle wrapped in cloth and unfolds it with a grin, pancakes still warm, stacked, and slightly uneven. No one's looking. You take one. It's crisp at the edge, soft in the center, and smells faintly of thyme. You close your eyes and chew. The festival is beginning. You wake early the next day, stirred by birds you don't recognize and the soft creak of a leather flask refilled nearby. The air is cool, tinged with mist, and something toasted someone's already warming breakfast over a tiny fire of damp twigs and dried dung. Charming. Today's walk is gentler. You cross a stone bridge built crookedly over a stream so shallow even the frogs look unimpressed. But your mood lifts because ahead, just past the bend, is a sight every medieval pilgrim quietly hoped for: a wafer seller. Yes, you heard that right. A wafer cart run by an older man whose beard is long and flour-dusted and whose wooden box opens like a magician's trunk. Inside are rows of delicate, crispy wafers stacked like playing cards. They are warm, sweet, paper-thin. He sees your interest and smiles. Fresh this morning, he says, placing one gently into your palm. You bite in. It's a soft crunch at first. Then a whisper of honey cinnamon and a curious hint of rose water. It dissolves almost immediately, leaving behind warmth and a grin. You buy another. The historical fact tonight is this: wafers, or wafres in Middle English, were a popular medieval snack, especially among pilgrims, festival goers, and the clergy. Made from flour, water, and sometimes sweetened with sugar or spiced with exotic ingredients, wafers were cooked between two heated metal plates, often engraved with religious or symbolic designs. The result, an edible token, a crunchy reminder that yes, you were there, and yes, you could eat the memory. Now here's your quirky detail of the evening. Some wafer sellers were licensed to operate only during feast days and were considered halfway between street cooks and street performers. They'd shout, juggle, sing, and sometimes, if you were lucky, toss wafers into the crowd like edible confetti. One English manuscript even records a man being fined for flinging wafres with ungodly enthusiasm. Imagine that citation. You take your third wafer and sit near a mossy wall, letting it melt, while watching the seller carefully brush off his iron plates with a bundle of herbs. You wonder what he dreams of. Wafers chasing him through the streets. Wafers with wings again. Here's your gentle academic puzzle: were wafers food, art, or liturgy? In some churches, special wafers were made for religious ceremonies, but secular versions existed right beside them. Both shared tools, techniques, and often bakers. So where does devotion end and dessert begin? You lean back, feeling the sun on your face and wafer crumbs in your collar. A breeze picks up. You hear a laugh in the distance. And from the wafer seller's cart, a soft sizzling sound starts again, the next batch rising like thin gold between iron. And before we close this part of the journey, 3 crumbs of speculation were medieval wafers, the original business cards. Here's my crest, now eat it. Could you confess your sins by eating something shaped like your vices? And if someone flung a wafer at you with ungodly enthusiasm, would you be offended or delighted? You smile again and brush your hands clean. You'll remember this stop. Light. Crispy. A moment that disappears the second you taste it, just like all the best stories. By the time you reach the next village, your shoes are carrying a faint, sweet aroma. Not because of some divine revelation or roadside bakery, but because those pilgrim cookies wrapped carefully in linen are now slightly warm from your walking and might just be steaming faint vanilla into your socks. You sit by a crumbling stone wall, its moss-covered edge a perfect bench. In the distance, a bell tolls the evening call. A few other travelers are gathering some shaking dust from their sandals, others nibbling on bits of fruit or cheese. One older woman pulls out a small loaf stuffed with onion and sage baked hard as a brick and likely to survive a war. But you unwrap another treat. This one's a pressed date roll, possibly flavored with caraway or maybe fennel. The surprise is half the fun. These snacks weren't labeled. No medieval nutrition facts. Just a hopeful guess that what your cousin packed wouldn't turn entirely to stone before Bordeaux. Pilgrims had a few rules for their travel food. It had to be durable, edible, cold, and ideally smell less like a fish market after 3 days. Most importantly, it had to fit in your pack or your shoes, apparently. Let's explore that a bit. Why shoes? Was it custom necessity? Or maybe just medieval multitasking? Turns out foot travel was exhausting and space was precious. Some shoes were stitched wide with extra layers, ideal for tucking in a dry biscuit or hard cheese disc. Socks doubled as pockets. Scarves were snack bags. You wore your larder. One friar even wrote about keeping roasted chickpeas sewn into the hem of his habit. For penance and protein, he allegedly claimed. Tonight's historical fact. It was common for medieval travelers to carry journey bread, a dense, unleavened cake, meant to last weeks without mold. Often this bread was baked with dried fruit, coarse flour, and honey. It was food and fuel in one. The same style of bread was used for sea voyages. Odd detail of the night, some pilgrims used holy water to knead their dough, hoping to bake spiritual protection into their snacks. Pilgrim cookie meets divine insurance policy. If the devil dared touch your tartlet, well, it had been blessed. Here's the scholarly head-scratcher. Were medieval travel snacks really that common? Or are we projecting modern ideas of food on the go onto the past? Some historians argue most travelers stopped at monasteries or markets, daily needing no such stash. Others point to surviving recipes, crumbs in manuscript margins, and cheeky scribbles about bread fit for walking. You chew quietly on your fig bar, possibly a relic, possibly genius, and glance down the path. The sun is leaning hard into the horizon now. Shadows grow long. A few younger pilgrims are singing something off-key, maybe a psalm, or maybe just a tavern tune dressed in biblical clothing. Your legs stretch out. You count 3 blisters. The faint tang of vinegar from someone's lunch drifts your way. It's oddly comforting. Vinegar, in fact, was a common seasoning and preservative, poured on greens stewed with beans, or even diluted into a simple drink called pasca, once favored by Roman soldiers and inherited by monks. Yes, even your tangy breath is historically accurate. You lean back, staring up at the fluttering leaves. You start to wonder what other snacks were hidden in the hems and shoes of history. In parts of the Iberian Peninsula, pilgrims stuffed pine nuts and dried fig rounds into their cloaks. Elsewhere, fermented barley cakes were tucked into little wooden boxes that doubled as pillows. Practical, maybe. Lumpy, definitely. But it was either that or sharing stale bread with the chickens at a roadside farm. The sun slips lower and so do your eyelids. But just as you nod off, a distant laugh rouses you. A pair of traveling minstrels have set up a puppet show, one involving a donkey, a saint, and a suspiciously pancake-shaped relic. The crowd is chuckling softly. You make your way closer, drawn by the promise of warmth and humor. The fire crackles and someone passes you a thin, folded wafer. Not quite a pancake, not quite a cookie. This little treasure is a medieval hybrid snack made from flour, honey, and a pinch of rosewater. It's crisp, golden, and whisper thin. You break off a piece and the flavor hits like a memory-sweet floral with a bit of grit from wood-fired ash. It's surprisingly delightful. Let's not forget, too, that pilgrim snacks weren't just about sustenance. They were tokens. One bite might remind you of your grandmother's kitchen. Another might carry the blessing of a local priest. Sometimes snacks were even bartered, 2 honeyed wafers for a song or a bundle of raisins for a secret shortcut. Tonight, you give away your last pressed date roll to a barefoot child who's been quietly watching the show from behind a log. They smile with eyes too wide for their age and disappear into the shadows. You wonder what they'll trade it for tomorrow. Now the crowd disperses. Some wander back to the road. Others curl into cloaks by the fire. You stretch again. Your back cracks. The old woman from earlier snores like a contented goose. And you lie back, one hand on your pouch of almost crumbs, the other under your head. Tonight's debate floats through your mind once more. What counts as a travel snack in a world without plastic wrap, Tupperware, or vending machines? Maybe anything edible that survives a shoe counts. You chuckle softly. You watch a moth dance near the flames. The stars above begin to glint through the deepening blue. You wonder, not for the first time, how many other pilgrims lay under this same sky bellies, warmed by half-stale bread and fig-smeared fingers. And then your mind drifts. Maybe tomorrow you'll try baking something new, something folded, sweet, and durable. Maybe you'll even share it, or maybe not. Sharing in medieval times was noble, but so was not starving. You sigh soft as the fire's last crackle. Your dreams tonight will be sugared, humble, and very, very portable. You wake with a stiff back and a mouth that tastes faintly of hay. Somewhere in the early light, a cockerel tries to summon drama with a half-hearted crow, and it sounds just as tired as you feel. The village you stopped in, if you can call 3 stone huts, and a village hasn't quite started its day. But you devoted pilgrim snacker that you are, have pancakes on your mind. Not the fluffy kind that leap onto plates in American diners. No, these are medieval peasant pancakes, flat crackled, spiced with whatever was in the air or ground at the time. Some were made from barley flour, others from chestnut, and a few daring cooks even tried dried pea paste. Yes, a pancake made of peas. You're intrigued. You're also a little alarmed. As you brush off straw from your tunic and lace up your traveling shoes, which you now treat with the reverence reserved for both relics and mobile pantries, you pull out what remains of yesterday's pancake. It's not soft anymore. It never really was. But it has a chew to it, and a sweetness that must have come from honey soaked into the batter and then crisped by fire. Breakfast served, you start walking. The path is less mud today and more packed earth kissed by dew. You pass a hedgerow with berries you probably shouldn't eat. A shepherd waves to you and points at a trail veering off to the left. You nod, thank him with a bow that feels more dramatic than necessary, and turn. It's during this leg of your journey that you begin to notice something. Everyone seems to have their own pancake story. A young monk tells you how his abbey used to make sour, lentil pancakes every fast day. They helped keep us quiet, he adds, possibly referring to digestive acoustics. Another traveler, a red-faced merchant with far too many belts, tells you about pancakes cooked on the inside of shields. Gets the iron flavor in, he claims proudly. You're not sure if that's bravery or just the medieval version of non-stick cookware. The truth is, pancakes were a culinary canvas. They held what little could be spared: leftover leeks, old cheese rinds, ground nuts, the final scrapings of a spice jar. In a world where food storage was more a suggestion than a science, pancakes were survival. Your historical fact for tonight: pancakes, or flatbreads resembling them, were common in medieval Europe, especially among peasants. They required minimal ingredients, could be cooked over open fire, and traveled well. They were also often made to celebrate the days before Lent, when fats and sweets had to be used up. Odd detail: some households hid small tokens or herbs inside pancakes as omens or games. Bite into a coin luck, a thistle bad news, a tooth. Probably just poor quality control. Here's your academic debate. Were pancakes truly a peasant invention, or did they trickle down from nobler kitchens? Some scholars suggest wealthy households experimented with honeyed or almond-stuffed versions that later flattened in popularity. Others insist it began with the poor necessity as the mother of invention and all that. Back on the trail, your stomach hums its slow digestive tune. You hear laughter ahead, A group has gathered near a bend in the road, seated in a half circle. You slow your pace. They're not fighting, they're flipping. Yes, pancake flipping. It's a local tradition, someone tells you. Pilgrims passing through can attempt to toss a griddle cake over a string hung between two poles. Land it whole on the skillet and you win bread. Miss it and, well, no one really remembers. Probably just embarrassment. You watch a few rounds, most fail. One girl about 8 flips her pancake perfectly and screams with joy loud enough to wake Charlemagne's ghost. You take your turn. It's not graceful. Your pancake wobbles like a duck with a twisted foot. But it lands, not in the pan, but on the head of a kindly old man who declares you blessed by batter. You sit with them for a while, share stories, exchange snacks. Someone gives you a disc of sweetened dough stuffed with lentils. It tastes far better than it sounds. The sun is higher now and your feet remind you they weren't made for festival games. So you pack up again. Wave goodbye. Resume the rhythm of the road. The day is long and there are still hills to climb. But for a moment you carry warmth, not just from the food or the fire or the increasingly warm pancake in your shoe, but from the absurd, beautiful realization that people, no matter the century, find joy in flipping food. Your journey continues. The next morning greets you not with sunlight, but with the thick smell of wood smoke and frying batter. You wake under your woolen blanket stretched between two knobby branches, and it takes a second to realize where you are, just off a trade road near a village whose name you forgot almost instantly. But your nose remembers. Someone somewhere is making pancakes. Now, these are not the tall, fluffy stacks you might know. These are medieval pancakes. Flat pans scorched and possibly made with pea flour or leftover barley mash. But still warm, oily, and fragrant enough to make your stomach grumble in lowercase Latin. You pack your things and wander toward the scent. The campfire is hidden behind a lean-to of woven branches, and around it, 3 travelers, one of them flipping cakes on a white iron pan set over embers. There's a pause as they notice you, then a nod. You're among pilgrims, or maybe fugitives. It's hard to tell this early. One offers you a chunk. You take it. It's chewy, peppery, and has something suspiciously sweet, perhaps. Diced parsnip or honeyed lentil. No one speaks at first. The crackle of the fire does all the talking. Medieval pancakes, you learn, were festival food, often tied to religious holidays, seasonal transitions, or secret indulgences. In fact, the term pancake could cover a host of humble flatbreads, some fried, some baked, others steamed on hot rocks and stuffed with herb paste or pounded fruit. They were the edible intersection of economy and joy. Today's historical fact. In much of medieval Europe, pancakes marked Shrove Tuesday, the feast before Lent. The logic was divine and practical use: up eggs, butter, and milk before the fasting season. The result, crispy golden discs symbolizing the sun hope and the last taste of richness before 40 days of penance. But here's the oddity. Not all pancakes were sweet or celebratory. Some were covert. In periods of strict fasting, villagers might fry batter made of peas or beans, add a touch of ash for color, and claim it was bread. This worked about half the time. Church inspectors weren't known for their sense of humor. There are stories, real or exaggerated, of bishops cracking down on pancake gatherings, confiscating frying pans like they were instruments of sin. One even declared that a flat cake taken with joy is a danger to the soul. Sounds harsh, but then again, you've never had to argue theology with someone holding a spatula. And now the scholarly wrinkle: were pancakes subversive? Some argue they represented a quiet resistance, a way for peasants to reclaim flavor, festival, and control. Others suggest we're romanticizing flatbread. After all, not everything round and golden was a symbol. Sometimes people just fried things because boiling water was too precious to waste. You chew slowly. The cake sticks slightly to your teeth, leaving behind a whisper of time. One of the travelers hums a tune. Another flips another cake. Time slows. Then the conversation begins. One woman tells you about a town where Pancake Day involved flinging them onto roofs for luck. Another recalls a story where a cursed monk had to flip cakes nonstop for a week to break a spell. He survived barely, but never touched a pan again. The fire dims. Someone tosses on a handful of dried mint, and the air turns sharp and herbal. You sip from a shared tin mug. Warm water lightly steeped with hay or barley tea. Surprisingly good. The oldest traveler, a man with a chin like a wood carving, leans closer. He tells you of ghost pancakes, flatbreads left at crossroads for lost souls, eaten by dawn or else they turn to stone. He swears he saw one rise and walk away once, but he also swears by garlic poultices for toothaches, so the jury's out. A younger boy barely past 15 shares that, in his village, pancakes were folded into pouches and tied with flax thread, each one stuffed with messages, a secret wish, a prayer, a name of someone lost. These would be burned at midsummer and the ashes scattered at crossroads. He says his grandmother claimed one of hers came true. It rained for 7 days straight after. She only wished the neighbor's pig would stop squealing, he adds, eyes wide. And then the strangest tale. A woman named Eleonora speaks of a shadow pancake, a myth in her town. According to her, it's a cake made only at night without speaking, using flour ground from barley grown beside gallows trees. It must be cooked on a pan that has never been washed, only wiped with rosemary. If made correctly, the pancake reveals a secret about your future in the pattern of its scorch marks. Most people just see a dog, she admits, or their tax collector. You thank them and move on. The morning is young and the road ahead winds between stone walls and stubbled fields. Birds dart in hedgerows. A distant cart squeaks. You think about pancakes, about how even the simplest food flour oil fire can carry stories, sacred stories, rebellious ones, silly ones. You reach a clearing where someone has scratched a drawing into the dirt, a circle with 4 dots. A pancake. A face, maybe both. You pause and smile. And then a gust of wind carries the scent of something new, nutmeg. Maybe cinnamon. Someone else is cooking ahead. The day has barely started, and already it smells like memory. You wrap your scarf tighter, rub a bit of flour off your fingers, and keep walking. There's a little more bounce in your step now. A little more sweetness in your breath. You're not just following the road. You're following crumbs of culture, crumbs of resistance, and crumbs of accidental culinary genius. And maybe you'll leave a pancake behind too one day at a crossroads for someone else to find. 3 quiet jokes. If medieval peasants had Instagram, it would just be 200 photos of the same pancake with different garnishes. This one's got parsley. And blessed. Why did the pancake get excommunicated? Because it refused to fold. Some monks claim frying pancakes was a temptation of the flesh. Others, hey friends, tonight let's explore what happened after that warm, pancake-scented dawn. Because as you walk along the uneven road, your stomach lined with chewy batter and your mind thick with stories of monks and mystery cakes, the landscape begins to change. You pass under an arch of bent trees, their trunks twisted as if they once tried to dance but gave up halfway through. The air smells of wet moss and smoke from some far-off hearth. This stretch of the journey is quiet, unusually quiet. Even your boots seem to pad more gently on the earth. Ahead, a shape emerges, a stone cottage sagging like a tired dog, tucked into a hollow near a brook. No smoke from the chimney, but a wooden sign hangs loosely above the door, creaking gently in the breeze. It reads in worn letters, "Cakes and candlelight." You knock. Nothing. Then slowly the door opens. A small elderly woman stares at you. Not suspicious, just tired. She waves you in without a word. Inside it's dim and cramped, but the warmth hugs you like a woolen shawl. The shelves are cluttered with earthenware pots, dried herbs, and what appears to be dozens of flat cakes hanging on strings from the ceiling, like strange edible mobiles. She gestures toward a stool. You sit. She brings a plate, a flat cake with rough edges speckled with something green. You nibble. The flavor is bold, bitter in places, bright in others, like dandelion mixed with old cheese and something smoky. She watches your face, then smiles satisfied. Ash cake, she finally says. Her voice is scratchy but calm. Cooked on stones, wrapped in cabbage leaves first. Keeps the spirit from escaping. You blink. She nods as if this is the most reasonable thing you'll hear all day. Ash cakes, you learn, were common among the poorest of medieval communities, especially those who traveled or lived on the edges of society. They didn't require fancy tools, just a fire, some hot stones, and something to wrap the batter in. Cabbage, burdock, dock leaves. Sometimes, if you were lucky, actual cloth soaked in broth. Today's historical fact. In many peasant communities, ash cakes were survival food, quick to cook, hard to mess up, and endlessly adaptable. You could throw in nettles, onion peels, even powdered fish bones. One chronicler in 1323 called them the flat hope of the barefooted. The odd detail, some believed that the cakes could absorb bad dreams if eaten before sleep. Parents would press the dough with their thumbs and whisper a prayer before placing it near the hearth. In some places, the ashes themselves were stirred into the batter, a symbol of humility or maybe just efficient cleaning. Now for the scholarly debate. Were ash cakes an invention of necessity or of ritual? Some anthropologists argue they reflect a deeper spiritual symbolism, food literally born from the hearth, merging nourishment with household magic. Others say no, they were just easy and cheap, like boiling water without the pot. You take another bite. You're not sure what it means, but you do feel warmer, heavier, like someone wrapped your bones in a soft spell. The woman speaks again, this time in story. She tells you about a man who once wandered in wearing a nobleman's boots and a pauper's cloak. Said he was cursed, doomed to eat only ash cakes until he remembered the name of the woman he betrayed. He stayed for a week, ate every day. On the seventh morning, he wept and said, "Marion." Then he vanished. The woman, your host, shrugs. Maybe he found her. Maybe he turned into smoke. You sip from a cracked mug. She offers some kind of nettle broth with floating mustard seeds. It tastes like every garden argument you've ever heard. Sharp, green, and lingering. After a time, you thank her. She slips a flat cake into your satchel. Eat it when the moon is small, she advises, but not if you're in love. You step back into the fading day. The clouds are thick above, but the wind has stilled. You walk. And as you go, you notice a strange thing. Other cottages all shuttered. But outside, nearly everyone, a small flat cake rests on a stone. Offerings, markers, warnings. You don't know, but your path feels guided, like someone has scattered breadcrumbs made of flour and ash and old secrets. You follow, you always follow. By the time the next village comes into view, the morning mist has lifted just enough to reveal crooked chimneys and low stone walls covered in moss. You pull your cloak a little tighter, more from habit than from chill. The scent of last night's pancakes still lingers faintly on your fingers, a ghost of thyme and lentil oil. This village doesn't have a name on any of your maps, but it has sounds: the creak of wooden carts, the snap of laundry in the breeze, and a faint rhythmic tapping, a drum, a pestle. As you step through the gate, it becomes clear. It's the slap, slap, slap of batter meeting hot metal. Of course, it's pancake day again. The locals don't look up when you pass. They're busy. Women in aprons swing pans over hearths. Men haul sacks of barley and turn spit-roasted cabbages. Children chase each other, shouting something about the golden prize. In the center of the village square, there's a kind of altar made of flat stones, and resting on top, a giant pancake, the size of a small shield, steaming and speckled with herbs. You join the outer ring of villagers watching the ritual unfold. A boy with red cheeks and flour in his eyebrows steps forward. He's handed a wooden spoon and makes a ceremonial circle over the pancake before attempting to flip it and failing magnificently. The crowd cheers anyway. Today's historical fact: pancakes weren't just food in the Middle Ages. They were part of communal games. In parts of England and France, there were pancake races, pancake tosses, and even pancake duels. Losers were often pelted with raw batter or had to clean the pans for a week. It was food as festivity, a moment of chaos before the silence of Lent. But here comes the curious detail. In some remote villages, the pancakes were judged not by taste, but by sound. A good pancake was one that sizzled correctly when it hit the pan. The more melodic the sizzle, the luckier the year. Some even believed you could predict marriages, harvests, or even deaths by the way the batter sang. Imagine a fortune teller leaning over your breakfast. Now here's the scholarly wrinkle: were these rituals actual religious remnants or just excuses to play with food? Some argue they were holdovers from older pagan celebrations that honored the sun round golden hot. Others believe it was simply a human need to break monotony to make a meal feel magical. After all, it's hard to be gloomy when flour's flying. You follow the scent to a side alley where a young woman is crouched over a clay skillet balanced on a brazier. Her pancake is thinner, almost crepe-like, and she sprinkles it with dried apple slices and crushed juniper berries. She glances up and says without preamble, "You want one?" You nod. The bite is tart, smoky with a hint of pine. Unexpected, like eating a forest in spring. She tells you her family makes these only once a year. Her grandmother says they protect against nightmares. Her uncle swears they lure hedgehogs into the garden. She shrugs. Maybe both are true. Around the corner, an older man is balancing a tray of savory pancakes stuffed with minced root vegetables and something chewy that might be fish. You're not sure. He sees your hesitation and grins. You eat what the road gives, he says. That's the rule. You take a cautious bite. It's salty, buttery, and oddly satisfying. Then come the stories. One woman swears she once cooked a pancake so large it took 4 men to flip. Another insists her cousin's pancakes cured a bout of lovesickness that had lasted 3 years and a sheep's worth of tears. A boy tries to convince you he saw a pancake fly across the abbey courtyard and knock the abbot's hat clean off. The sky begins to shift to that soft afternoon gold, and the village prepares for the final event, the pancake procession. A trail of children, each holding a small pancake on a wooden platter, weaves through the village. They sing a tuneless but enthusiastic song about batter and blessings. Behind them, a donkey carries a huge frying pan like a crown. The symbolism is unclear, but the joy is real. As the line passes, people toss handfuls of oats and dried beans, not at the children, thankfully, but at the ground as if planting luck. A woman standing next to you whispers that the pancake parade was once a march to drive away winter. Others say it was to call down a good harvest, or maybe just a good mood. The sun dips lower. A final pancake is offered to the village well, a golden disc laid gently on the stone rim before being crumbled and tossed in. You hear someone murmur that the well spirit is fond of flour. You sit for a while near the well belly-full head, spinning slightly from sun and stories. There's something ancient and ridiculous about all this, but comforting too. Pancakes, it seems, were more than a snack. They were vessels of hope, shields against the unknown, discs of memory passed down with a smear of honey or a pinch of salt. As twilight descends, you find a spot beneath a tree, unwrap the last of your travel bread, and think about frying pans. About how, in a world of mud and worry, someone always finds a way to flip joy into something warm and edible. One final joke drifts across the village as the fire crackles low. What do you call a pancake that tells stories? A legendary dish. You groan, you smile, then you sleep. By the time the next village comes into view, the morning mist has lifted just enough to reveal crooked chimneys and low stone walls covered in moss. You pull your cloak a little tighter, more from habit than from chill. The scent of last night's pancakes still lingers faintly on your fingers, a ghost of thyme and lentil oil. This village doesn't have a name on any of your maps, but it has sounds: the creak of wooden carts, the snap of laundry in the breeze, and a faint rhythmic tapping. A drum, a pestle. As you step through the gate, it becomes clear. It's the slap, slap, slap of batter meeting hot metal. Of course, it's pancake day, again. The locals don't look up when you pass. They're busy. Women in aprons swing pans over hearths. Men haul sacks of barley and turn spit-roasted cabbages. Children chase each other, shouting something about the golden prize. In the center of the village square, there's a kind of altar made of flat stones, and resting on top a giant pancake the size of a small shield, steaming and speckled with herbs. You join the outer ring of villagers watching the ritual unfold. A boy with red cheeks and flour in his eyebrows steps forward. He's handed a wooden spoon and makes a ceremonial circle over the pancake before attempting to flip it and failing magnificently. The crowd cheers anyway. Today's historical fact: pancakes weren't just food in the Middle Ages, they were part of communal games. In parts of England and France, there were pancake races, pancake tosses, and even pancake duels. Losers were often pelted with raw batter or had to clean the pans for a week. It was food as festivity, a moment of chaos before the silence of Lent. But here comes the curious detail. In some remote villages, the pancakes were judged not by taste, but by sound. A good pancake was one that sizzled correctly when it hit the pan. The more melodic the sizzle, the luckier the year. Some even believed you could predict marriages, harvests, or even deaths by the way the batter sang. Imagine a fortune teller leaning over your breakfast. Now here's the scholarly wrinkle: were these rituals actual religious remnants or just excuses to play with food? Some argue they were holdovers from older pagan celebrations that honored the sun round golden hot. Others believe it was simply a human need to break monotony to make a meal feel magical. After all, it's hard to be gloomy when flour is flying. You follow the scent to a side alley where a young woman is crouched over a clay skillet balanced on a brazier. Her pancake is thinner, almost crepe-like, and she sprinkles it with dried apple slices and crushed juniper berries. She glances up and says without preamble, "You want one?" You nod. The bite is tart, smoky with a hint of pine. Unexpected. Like eating a forest in spring. She tells you her family makes these only once a year. Her grandmother says they protect against nightmares. Her uncle swears they lure hedgehogs into the garden. She shrugs. Maybe both are true. Around the corner, an older man is balancing a tray of savory pancakes stuffed with minced root vegetables and something chewy that might be fish. You're not sure. He sees your hesitation and grins. You eat what the road gives, he says. That's the rule. You take a cautious bite. It's salty, buttery, and oddly satisfying. Then come the stories. One woman swears she once cooked a pancake so large it took 4 men to flip. Another insists her cousin's pancakes cured a bout of lovesickness that had lasted 3 years and a sheep's worth of tears. A boy tries to convince you he saw a pancake fly across the abbey courtyard and knock the abbot's hat clean off. The sky begins to shift to that soft afternoon gold, and the village prepares for the final event, the pancake procession. A trail of children, each holding a small pancake on a wooden platter, weaves through the village. They sing a tuneless but enthusiastic song about batter and blessings. Behind them, a donkey carries a huge frying pan, like a crown. The symbolism is unclear, but the joy is real. As the line passes, people toss handfuls of oats and dried beans, not at the children thankfully, but at the ground as if planting luck. A woman standing next to you whispers that the pancake parade was once a march to drive away winter. Others say it was to call down a good harvest, or maybe just a good mood. The sun dips lower. A final pancake is offered to the village well, a golden disc laid gently on the stone rim before being crumbled and tossed in. You hear someone murmur that the well spirit is fond of flour. You sit for a while near the well bellyful head, spinning slightly from sun and stories. There's something ancient and ridiculous about all this, but comforting too. Pancakes, it seems, were more than a snack. They were vessels of hope, shields against the unknown, discs of memory passed down with a smear of honey or a pinch of salt. As twilight descends, you find a spot beneath a tree, unwrap the last of your travel bread, and think about frying pans. About how in a world of mud and worry, someone always finds a way to flip joy into something warm and edible. One final joke drifts across the village as the fire crackles low. What do you call a pancake that tells stories, a legendary dish? You groan, you smile, then you sleep. It starts with a riddle carved into a wooden bench. What flips without hands and feeds without teeth? You sit on it anyway, because that's what tired legs do in the late medieval countryside. The bench leans under your weight, creaks like a small confession, and you stare out at the path ahead, cobbled with stones, lined with weeds, and fragrant with fried oil from someone's distant breakfast. Somewhere down the road, a child laughs. Not the cruel kind of laugh, the pancake kind. You follow it, through brambles, past a one-eyed goat, over a bridge whose guard charges a toll of 1 good story or 2 bad ones. You offer the tale of a village where pancakes were currency during famine, and he lets you pass. The town ahead is celebrating something. You hear bells, yes, but also the unmistakable slap of batter hitting hot iron. A festival, a saint's day, or something rarer, a pancake fair. Yes, an entire market square transformed by flatbread. There are stacks of golden discs layered with herbs, others filled with berries, cheese, or mashed leeks. Some rolled into tubes and balanced like scrolls in baskets lined with wool. One booth boasts pancakes made by spinning batter off a spoon mid-air, catching it again before it lands. Another dares you to identify which pancake has been fried with rose water. Spoiler, it's the one that smells like your aunt's soap. This is your historical fact during feast days and rural celebrations. Pancakes weren't just food, they were games, competition, spectacle. Villages would hold flipping races where participants sprinted while flipping cakes and pans, sometimes in heavy wool cloaks, other times blindfolded. Winners received sacks of grain, or if lucky, a kiss from the baker's daughter or son, depending on local customs. But here's the odd detail: in some places, pancake contests were judged not only by speed or number of flips, but by style. Flourishes, the ability to make the cake spin 3 times midair and land back in the pan without folding, a medieval gymnastics of griddle. And the scholarly debate, were these fairs local invention or borrowed from earlier Roman food games? Some researchers argue that pancake rituals have deeper roots in Saturnalia, where mockery and chaos were baked right into the feast. Others say rural Europeans just really liked excuses to play with their food. You sit on a barrel chewing a savory cake flavored with wild garlic. A boy nearby balances a pancake on his head and parades around like a bishop. The crowd cheers. Someone hands you a folded pancake with a riddle inside. What's round, hot, and often mistaken for the moon? The answer clearly is someone's very optimistic pancake. A fiddler starts up near the fountain. Old couples dance in tight circles. Children chase pancake-shaped tambourines. You're invited to join a judging panel. The contestants, three elderly sisters, who each claim to have invented the perfect pancake. One adds dried cherries, the second insists on barley flour. The third swears by a pinch of ashes for depth. You taste them all. They are in their own way, each a masterpiece. The third one reminds you of campfire nights and quiet rebellion. You award her the ribbon. She shrugs and says she just wanted an excuse to make more. At twilight, a ceremonial pancake is paraded through the streets. It's larger than a wagon wheel and carried on a plank by 6 men, followed by drummers and a juggler who drops everything except his smile. The cake is placed at the center of the village square. Everyone gathers. A prayer is spoken not to saints, but to harvest to griddles that don't stick to cows that keep giving milk. And then in one joyous moment, the pancake is sliced into pieces and flung like frisbees into the crowd. You catch one, still warm. Someone whispers that the pancake was made with water from the first thaw flour from last year's harvest and eggs laid at sunrise. You don't know if it's true. You don't care. You eat it slowly, watching the stars wink awake. In the distance, a church bell tolls not for mass, but to signal the end of the feast. One final note hangs in the air like steam. You stretch, full, drowsy, grateful. On your way out, a small girl presses something into your palm. It's another pancake, cold now but wrapped in a poem. When days are short and nights grow long, eat something warm and carry on. You do just that. Evening descends like ink spilled over parchment, and you find yourself beneath a crumbling wooden eave that smells faintly of beeswax and damp hay. The little cottage belongs to a widow who trades in barley meal in regional gossip. She has just handed you a warm bundle wrapped in coarse linen, your dinner, she says with a smirk. You peel back the cloth. Pancakes again, but not the crisp, smoky kind you've come to associate with campsites and roadside fires. These are thicker, folded, laced with something pungent and herbal, a whisper of onion, a shadow of cheese. The edges are brown, but the center stays creamy, more of a cake than a flapjack. The texture pulls like damp parchment, and yet it's oddly satisfying. You settle onto a hay-stuffed cushion near the hearth and begin to eat while the widow tells you stories about pancake feasts gone wrong, about battered demons that rose from forgotten griddles, about lovers who confessed sins over a shared skillet, about a mayor who choked on a pancake during a town sermon and was never quite the same again. She chuckles and you pretend you aren't slightly unnerved. Tonight's historical fact: pancakes in medieval Europe weren't just peasant food, they were deeply symbolic. Their shape, their ingredients, and even their preparation methods often carried meaning. In some communities, pancakes represented unity, flat and shared among all at the table. In others, they were folded to conceal a surprise, a coin, a dried cherry, a bean. Whoever found the object in their pancake was either blessed for the year or destined to do the washing up. Sometimes both. And here's tonight's oddity: in 14th century France, there were pancake duels. Not with weapons made of batter, sadly. Rather, they were culinary showdowns held during carnival season, where cooks competed to see who could create the thinnest, most ornate, or best spiced pancake. Townspeople would cheer, judges would frown, and the loser was sometimes required to eat only porridge for a week. No spices, just oats. A true medieval punishment. Now comes the scholarly wrinkle. Did these pancakes influence politics? Sounds strange, doesn't it? But some argue that pancake feasts were used to curry favor among villagers or to subtly spread ideas. Hidden inside the folds of a pancake could be herbs associated with healing or fertility, or a bit of nutmeg, an expensive spice that signaled a cook's wealth or connections. Sharing such a dish wasn't just about flavor, it was about power. The widow leans in and asks if you've ever tried pancake wine. You blink. She explains in her youth, some villagers soaked stale pancakes in sour ale and fermented the mixture with berries. The result was foul, she admits, but it gave you dreams like no other. She hasn't made it since the bishop banned experiments of the tongue. You nod solemnly, then take another bite. The pancake has cooled now and the cheese inside has taken on a tangier note. It reminds you of something between a dumpling and a sigh. Later, you help her clean the pan. She gives you a bit of butter scraped from a clay crock, instructs you to smear it on your boots to keep out the jealous fairies, and sends you off with a wink. You wonder how much of that advice is practical and how much is pancake-induced madness. The road tonight is quieter. Crickets murmur in the hedges. A toad sings something that might be praise or judgment. You're not sure. You reach a shrine built from twisted roots and old bread loaves. Offerings, maybe one has a pancake folded into a triangle charred black. A warning, a gift you leave behind a breadcrumb. It feels polite. By the time you find your next resting spot, a hollow under a yew tree, you're thinking not about the food, but what food means. Pancakes especially. They're almost nothing flour, water, heat. And yet in every village they've become something else. Markers of time, vessels for jokes, dares, dreams, secrets. Soft, edible metaphors. You nibble the last scrap of your dinner as you lie on your cloak. It tastes faintly of mint and smoke. You wonder how many other stories are folded into flour across time. And you sleep. You come upon the village just as the evening bells begin to toll. They don't sound like bells, really more like hollow pots clanging in time, strung up on ropes and hammered with wooden mallets. But the intention is there. Time is marked, and so is supper. Smoke coils from low chimneys, some built straight into the thatch. Children chase each other around crooked fences. A goat observes you with the detached suspicion of one who has seen too much. You're dusty, slightly sunburned, and your thoughts are still lingering on the memory of a pancake flavored with time and folklore. A woman calls to you from a doorway. She's holding a ladle and pointing with it. You look like someone who knows a good griddle, she says. You're not sure what that means, but you nod as if you do. You're ushered inside. The house is warm, dim, and fragrant with onions. There's a large stone hearth, a woven cot, and two cats who regard you with royal indifference. On the hearth, a flat stone has been set near the coals and atop it batter. Thin spreading sizzled at the edges. Pancakes, again. But not just any pancakes. These are folded. Triangular like handkerchiefs. Each one has a surprise inside. A dollop of soft cheese. A spoonful of mashed apples. Bits of preserved turnip. These are festival parcels, the culinary equivalent of wrapped gifts. Tonight's fact-folded pancakes were a regional art form. In parts of Brittany, Germany, and the Low Countries, pancakes were layered or rolled with fillings and served as celebratory meals. Sometimes savory, sometimes sweet, sometimes both in sequence. A pancake procession, if you will. The oddity in one 14th century Flemish household book, there's a note about pannenkoeken voor de katten, pancakes for the cats. Historians argue whether this was literal or metaphor. One theory, these were burnt or torn pancakes offered to household cats as a kind of kitchen ritual, perhaps even symbolic of protecting the home. And now the academic tension. Were these folded pancakes a sign of wealth or practicality? Some suggest that adding fillings and folding them created the illusion of abundance, a culinary sleight of hand. Others say it reflects a surplus, a sign that you could afford cheese and apples and eggs even in winter. The woman hands you a triangle of batter with something warm inside. You bite carefully, it leaks pear. Soft, gritty, sweet. The kind of taste that makes you forget time for a moment. She tells you it's a wedding dish. Her niece was married 2 weeks ago, and they made trays of them for the village. Folded pancakes as favors. Easy to carry, impossible to forget. Then she tells you the story of the folded cake curse. Long ago, she says, a baker refused to fold his pancakes properly for a visiting bishop. The bishop was offended, the pancakes collapsed, and the baker's chimney never drew smoke again. The house had to be rebuilt. You laugh. She doesn't. Maybe it's true. Later that evening, you're outside on a bench watching shadows stretch. The cats have followed you. One rubs against your leg. You give it a scrap. It seems satisfied. You notice something scratched into the wood of the bench, a circle, 2 dots, and a folded line. Like a smile with a lid, a folded pancake symbol, a secret code. Maybe kids doodling. Maybe pilgrims passing through, leaving edible graffiti. As the stars come out, you reflect folded pancakes weren't just practical. They were protective. Wrapped food carried meaning, care, caution, generosity. You didn't just eat a pancake. You unwrapped it like a letter from the cook. The village quiets. Somewhere a rooster crows prematurely. Maybe he's dreaming. You close your eyes for a second and imagine a medieval pancake stuffed with dreams, folded carefully so nothing leaks out. Then a thought hits you. What if the real reason peasants folded pancakes was to hide contraband and egg during fast day? A sliver of meat when the priest walked by. A whisper of rebellion salted and fried. You chuckle. The cat glares at you. The stars flicker like grease bubbles on an open pan. You settle in heart-full, stomach folded. The night is soft. The road continues tomorrow. You arrive at a riverside village just as the fog begins to lift. The river here isn't wide, but it is stubborn, thick with reeds and ancient stones that poke out like knuckles from the skin of the earth. It hums with slow current and the faint smell of fish. On the bank, 3 children crouch around a blackened skillet, each holding a stick, poking what looks to be a lopsided, sizzling mass. It's a pancake, or at least a distant cousin. You approach with a smile. One child looks up, hands you a slice. It smells of onion and wild chives. The texture is dense, chewy, and a little smoky, somewhere between a fritter and a lost bread. They call it river cake here. You nod with reverence and take another bite. River pancakes weren't just food. They were offerings. In certain areas of medieval Europe, especially along trading waterways, people tossed cakes into rivers to bless crossings, bargain with river spirits, or commemorate the dead. Some were wrapped in herbs, others dyed with crushed berries, and a few stuffed with lentils or leeks. Today's historical fact river or water-related food rituals were common across pre-Christian and Christianized Europe. Water was life, but also a boundary between this world and the next, between safety and drowning. Offering pancakes or cakes was like tipping the ferryman in advance. Here's your quirky fact. There's an Irish tale about a village that threw pancakes into the river every full moon to keep water fairies from braiding their horses' manes. The cakes had to be slightly burnt, or the fairies would take offense. Too perfect, and they thought you were mocking them. Now the scholarly debate. Were these rituals absorbed into Christianity, or did they remain a quiet resistance of folk belief beneath the sanctioned calendar? Some say river cakes were eventually transformed into saints' day offerings. Others argue that the church tolerated these only when they were cloaked in Christian labels. A sacred pancake was fine, as long as it wasn't obviously bribing a water nymph. The children laugh and run off, leaving the skillet behind. You watch the river a moment, then follow the path uphill, where you see smoke curling above tree line. It leads to a hamlet no bigger than a handful of barns and huts, all with thatched roofs and moss-covered stones. There's a smell here. Not sweet, not savory, something earthy and clean. A woman is pressing batter between hot stones. She calls them pressed cakes, flat, wide, and full of wild greens, dandelion, nettle, and wild garlic. She explains these are fast day pancakes. No eggs, no dairy, just flour and bitter leaves. She offers one. You take it. It tastes like a memory of spring and a warning against indulgence. She tells you these cakes were eaten when the larder was near empty, or when the calendar said fasting was required but your stomach disagreed. Sometimes the cakes were so bitter they were rubbed with ash or dipped in tea made from tree bark to make them seem sweeter. You sit a while. The village is quiet. Chickens wander freely. Someone plays a flute in the distance, a tune that doesn't ask for attention, only acceptance. Pressed cakes, you learn, were often regional. Some were triangular, some were round, some were folded over on themselves like letters never sent. And here's the twist: in certain towns, unmarried women would make these cakes on certain moonlit nights and leave them outside their homes. If they vanished by morning, it meant a proposal was coming. If not, well, better luck next cycle. You make a joke aloud, something about pancakes as medieval dating apps, but the woman doesn't laugh. She just smiles and shrugs. Time passes. You thank her and move on, weaving through the trees until the forest opens into a meadow. Here the sun is finally warm, and the wind smells faintly of fennel and sheep. At the far end of the meadow, there's a festival tent, or what's left of it, a few poles, some fluttering cloth, a pile of stones that might once have been an oven. 3 men are gathered around one of them, stirring a bowl with a stick. They invite you to sit. You do. They're making travel cakes, dense, dry pancakes meant to survive days in a satchel. Flour, oil, dried fruit, and a pinch of salt, baked hard, then wrapped in cloth. These were the rations of pilgrims and merchants. Bite-sized prayers. They tell you monks would sometimes bless them before a journey. and that children would hide coins inside for luck. Today's cake tastes like dust and apricot. One man tells a story about a traveler who carried a cake for 5 years without eating it. Not because it was sacred, but because it was terrible. He gave it to a goat by accident once. The goat forgave him, but the cake never did. He swears it showed up in his luggage a decade later. You laugh. The men laugh. Someone passes a flask of elderflower cordial. It tastes like spring trying to be brave. The fire dims. A bird lands on a post and watches. You feel full, not just in the belly, but in the way stories can fill you. River cakes, pressed cakes, travel cakes. Each one carrying not just calories, but culture, layers of meaning, ritual, humor, quiet rebellion. As the sun sinks, the men begin packing. One gives you a small wrapped cake. For your road, he says. You nod and take the path downhill where the river waits again. The path curves around an orchard, now gnarled apple trees rising like old soldiers from the wet ground. Their leaves shimmer with morning mist and a crow flaps overhead like a piece of ink thrown across the sky. You pass under branches heavy with green fruit, not quite ripe, and your boots squelch in the mud. There is a smell in the air, sweet and sharp. Not the sweetness of sugar, but something older, fermented apples maybe, or drying fruit skins left out in a barn. You follow your nose and find tucked between two leaning stone cottages a stall. No one mans it, but the table is piled high with flat cakes wrapped in leaves. A sign hangs crookedly above fasting cakes. Take one, leave one. You're no stranger to this game by now. You unwrap a leaf. Inside is a thin, glossy cake folded twice like an old letter. You bite. It is soft, sour, and spiced faintly with anise. Not quite bread, not quite fruit. Something in between, and very, very medieval. These, you realize, are apple fasting cakes, born of necessity, carried through by memory. When fasting was mandated, and it often was not just during Lent, but Wednesdays, Fridays, vigils, feast eves, and more monks and peasants alike had to get creative. The line between sinful indulgence and spiritual nourishment was negotiable. The truth, fasting food was never just about abstinence. It was a stage for ingenuity. You couldn't eat meat fine, but what about almond paste shaped like pork, fish carved into birds, pancakes made from pounded apples and oil? Technically, you followed the rules. Spiritually, well, that's another debate. Today's historical fact. During medieval fasts, people avoided animal products, but many clever cooks crafted imitations so lifelike that bishops occasionally banned them. One 14th century manuscript warns against disguised meats served in monastic kitchens. Apparently, even piety has a loophole. Now for the strange details, some regions treated apples as sacred fast day fruit. In parts of Normandy and Saxony, dried apples were soaked, mashed, and bound with ground flax seed to create chewy cakes. These were pressed flat under stones, dried near smoke, and offered in silence. Silence was important. The idea was that humble food should enter with no ceremony, like a prayer you didn't want anyone to hear. And the scholarly debate. Did these quiet snacks nourish faith or sneak around it? Some argue that fasting cakes were a kind of edible descent, a way to obey, while subtly resisting the plainness imposed by religious elites. Others think that's overthinking it. After all, hungry people do clever things. You pocket one more cake and leave a smooth stone in its place. The rules, it seems, are being followed. A young boy appears as if conjured by the fog. He eyes you, then the table. Some of them taste like candle wax, he says. Others are good. The ones with bark in them, not so good. You nod, noted. He tells you that his grandmother makes them in the fireplace using apple peel, mashed beans, and dried nettle. The secret, he confides, is to let the batter sit overnight with cider lees. That and whispering to the dough. Dough gets shy if you're too loud. As you walk, he walks with you. He skips ahead, sometimes tosses pebbles into puddles, points out mushrooms that look like pancakes. One tree, he claims, drops fruit that smells like sugar, but tastes like soap. Soon you reach a ridge. Below in the shallow valley, smoke rises from a low roundhouse. The boy waves goodbye and darts into the brush. You descend. The family living here invites you to sit. They offer you a small clay plate and a flat cake wrapped in woven grass. This one is darker, more leathery. You bite. It is astonishingly sweet, almost fermented, like an ancient fruit roll-up. You ask what's in it. Apples and thyme, the woman says. They dry the slices first, then mash them with wine leaves and rosemary. It takes weeks. Sometimes the cakes are stored in carved wood boxes with beeswax-lined walls. You have to keep the spirits out, her husband adds. They like the sweet things. You eat slowly. The taste lingers. Smoky, herbal, tangy. They show you their store a shelf of wrapped cakes, some marked with symbols. A spiral for healing, a cross for mourning, a leaf for feast days. You wonder if anyone still remembers what all the symbols mean. After you leave, you keep walking and walking until the afternoon rain starts. It is soft and steady, the kind of rain that wants you to listen. You find a hollow under a tree and rest. From your pack, you pull one of the fasting cakes. It is damp now, but still edible. You eat half. The other half you leave on a stone, just in case something is hungry. And maybe far off, someone does the same for you. Fan 19. The tiny fair is just setting up as you arrive, marked by a patchy field with crooked stalls made of mismatched planks and painted cloth. The scent hits first spiced dough and firewood frying cheese and roasted herbs. Then the sounds follow. Laughter, clanging pots, and the squeak of a wheelbarrow too stubborn to retire. You've timed your arrival well, early enough to avoid the pickpockets, late enough to catch the first round of hot snacks. This isn't a royal market or a feast day extravaganza. It's a village gathering, one that springs up when the sun cooperates, the cows behave, and the local monk agrees to look the other way just this once. And at its center, like a small greasy sun, is the frying station. Here everything gets fried. Balls of lentil dough, discs of sour barley paste, even bundles of wild greens dipped in batter that might contain beer or might just be the same brine they use for pickles. You order something called a turnip whisper. It's not on a menu. A boy just yells it from the stall. What you get is a small fritter, crisp outside, creamy inside, and somehow both rooty and sweet. It steams in your hand. You try not to burn your tongue. Today's historical truth: fried foods were incredibly common in medieval village fairs, not just for taste but for spectacle. There was joy in the sizzle, the aroma, the transformation. Something humble becomes golden puffed alchemical, much like a pancake but crispier, messier, and often on a stick. Some even made a living off these treats, traveling vendors who learned to juggle hot oil and charm. One 14th century recipe book includes notes on how to serve fried snacks while dancing. Scholars disagree if it's satire, but wouldn't you want to see that? Now, the oddities, some fried fair foods were designed to vanish. Called phantom fritters, these snacks were stuffed with herbs or chopped fruit that disappeared entirely in cooking, leaving only flavor behind. You'd eat a crunchy shell filled with absinthe. Some said they carried wishes, others used them for pranks. One tale involves a merchant who tricked a rival into eating a fritter filled with rose petals and laxative. Which brings us to a delicious academic debate: were these fair foods just food or performance? Some culinary historians say yes. Cooking in public, frying, loudly layering spice, even selling jokes alongside food was a way of resisting drudgery. Others argue it was pure commerce. Whatever the reason, you've never seen someone this proud to hand over a grease-stained turnip. You eat slowly, leaning on a fence post. Behind you, children scream with laughter at a puppet show. One puppet is a pancake. It loses a duel to a sausage. The crowd goes wild. A woman sidles up next to you selling honeyed chickpeas wrapped in cabbage leaves. You buy some. They're warm, slightly sour, and dusted with mint. She asks if you want the whispering kind next time. You nod. You have no idea what it means. The fair moves around you like a slow tide. An old man plays a broken fiddle off-key, but with such joy it hardly matters. A baker throws discs of dough onto a hot stone and flips them with a sandal. Someone drops a fritter and cheers when a dog eats it whole. You watch a contest where villagers try to toss fried apples onto wooden poles. None succeed, but they all insist it's the wind's fault. In a quieter corner, a friar stands behind a sign that reads, "Fried sins, only the tasty ones." He's selling fritters made of wheat onion and black pepper. They taste like confession and breakfast. Then a bell rings. Not a church bell, but something smaller. It signals the appearance of the midday friar, a masked cook in a tall hat and soot-stained apron. They wheel out a contraption covered in gears and pans, and everyone cheers. You learn this is a local legend. Once a year, the midday friar appears to make the final fritter, a snack so light it's said to float if blessed. No one has ever succeeded. Today's version burns slightly but tastes of sage and lemon. Children clap. Elders pretend to disapprove. You notice a monk licking his fingers. The fair begins to wind down. Ash piles grow. Oil runs low. You pocket a last fritter, something round sweet and suspiciously warm. As you leave, you glance back and catch a glimpse of the puppet pancake rising from the stage floor. Someone's added a crown. You walk on. The wind smells of time. Your pocket smells like fried joy. And somewhere in the distance, another fair prepares its pans. You wake to bird song and the distant rhythm of hoofbeats. Morning fog clings low over the fields, silvering the grass and making the road ahead look like it leads straight into the sky. You stretch dust off your cloak and head toward the next village, where rumors say a festival of folded cakes is underway. Yes, folded cakes. Not folded like a napkin, mind you. Folded like secrets, like prayers, like stories tucked into layers of dough. As you approach, the air smells of browned butter, roasted apples, and something else, something faintly spiced like cinnamon or clove, but with an earthier edge. A market square has sprung up around a central bonfire. It isn't grand, just a ring of stones, smoke curling lazily from its heart. But the people are gathered, and their hands are full of cake. A child with honey-sticky fingers offers you a triangle of something warm. The outer crust is crisp and flaky. The filling stewed plum and hazelnut, barely sweet but rich enough to make your teeth hum. You smile. The child grins back, then runs off shouting something about the cake bell. And now you remember this is no ordinary day. This is a folded cake day, a celebration older than parchment, passed down like recipes whispered in kitchens, too humble to write anything down. Folded cakes in many parts of medieval Europe were more than dessert. They were edible symbols. They marked transitions, the turn of the season, the end of the harvest, the start of marriage, or the end of mourning. Today's historical fact: folded cakes, especially in Northern and Eastern Europe, often served as storytelling tools. Bakers used slits in the dough-layered fillings or hidden symbols baked inside to represent a local myth or family memory. Sometimes they baked dried beans or carved tokens into them. Whoever got the piece with the item, well, fate had plans for them. But here's the peculiar detail: in some traditions, the cake wasn't eaten at all. It was buried. A folded cake made of unleavened bread and forest herbs might be placed at the edge of a field to ask the spirits for good crops, or under a new couple's bed as a blessing. Some were left on windowsills overnight to listen for gossip. Don't ask how. It's a long, doughy story. And here's the scholarly debate. Were folded cakes a way to encode oral histories? Some food historians argue that patterns in folding, placement of ingredients, and even baking marks were part of a larger symbolic language, one lost as literacy spread and printing replaced oral storytelling. Others claim we're just reading too much into lunch. Someone rings a bell, a real one, and the crowd begins a slow circle dance. Not everyone joins. Some clap, others pass out folded cakes wrapped in cloth. You receive a second one, this one savory. Onion thyme, a hint of aged cheese, warm, chewy, and slightly charred on one edge. Perfection. A nearby baker notices your appreciation and beckons you over. Her hands are flour white, her apron streaked with berry. She tells you that in her grandmother's time, folded cakes were used to deliver messages. During times of war or famine, women might bake pleas for help into cakes or warnings or family secrets. The codes were simple: a pinch of salt here, a twist there, but meaningful to the trained eye or tongue. You help her roll a fresh batch. The dough is soft, yeasty, warm from the fire. She shows you how to fold it with care, layering in stewed greens and chopped chestnuts. A good folded cake tells the truth in silence, she says. It holds the story until someone bites it open. Someone laughs behind you. It's a man selling sweetened wine from a barrel cart. He claims his cakes are better than hers. A mock rivalry ensues. He offers you a taste. His version is filled with pears and almond paste drizzled with honey. Decadent. You decide not to pick sides. You sit near the bonfire, cake in one hand, cup of warm wine in the other. The smoke curls upward in slow spirals. Children play with sticks. Someone sings a local ballad, the kind with 10 verses and no real ending. You notice the baker again, now speaking with an old woman holding a folded cake wrapped in linen. They exchange a few quiet words. Then solemnly the old woman places the cake into the embers of the bonfire. A hush falls. This is part of it too, letting go. Some cakes are meant to be eaten, some are meant to burn. The air is thick with scent, flower ash, wild mint, and the faint salt of tears. You think of the cakes you've eaten, the ones you've shared, and the ones that were never meant to be touched. You think about messages wrapped in dough, waiting for the right teeth to understand them. You toss your last crumb into the fire and watch it vanish. Then you stand shoulders dusted with flour and step back onto the road. The fields ripple golden green around you. A folded cake festival behind you. The next story ahead. You wake to birdsong and the distant rhythm of hoofbeats. Morning fog clings low over the fields, silvering the grass, and making the road ahead look like it leads straight into the sky. You stretch dust off your cloak and head toward the next village where rumors say a festival of folded cakes is underway. Yes, folded cakes. Not folded like a napkin, mind you. Folded like secrets, like prayers, like stories tucked into layers of dough. As you approach, the air smells of brown butter, roasted apples, and something else, something faintly spiced like cinnamon or clove, but with an earthier edge. A market square has sprung up around a central bonfire. It isn't grand, just a ring of stones, smoke curling lazily from its heart. But the people are gathered and their hands are full of cake. A child with honey-sticky fingers offers you a triangle of something warm. The outer crust is crisp and flaky, the filling stewed plum and hazelnut, barely sweet but rich enough to make your teeth hum. You smile. The child grins back, then runs off shouting something about the cake bell. And now you remember this is no ordinary day. This is a folded cake day, a celebration older than parchment, passed down like recipes whispered in kitchens, too humble to write anything down. Folded cakes in many parts of medieval Europe were more than dessert. They were edible symbols. They marked transitions, the turn of the season, the end of the harvest, the start of marriage, or the end of mourning. Today's historical fact, folded cakes, especially in Northern and Eastern Europe, often served as storytelling tools. Bakers used slits in the dough-layered fillings or hidden symbols baked inside to represent a local myth or family memory. Sometimes they baked dried beans or carved tokens into them. Whoever got the piece with the item, well, fate had plans for them. But here's the peculiar detail: in some traditions, the cake wasn't eaten at all. It was buried. A folded cake made of unleavened bread and forest herbs might be placed at the edge of a field to ask the spirits for good crops, or under a new couple's bed as a blessing. Some were left on windowsills overnight to listen for gossip. Don't ask how, it's a long, doughy story. And here's the scholarly debate. Were folded cakes a way to encode oral histories? Some food historians argue that patterns in folding, placement of ingredients, and even baking marks were part of a larger symbolic language, one lost as literacy spread and printing replaced oral storytelling. Others claim we're just reading too much into lunch. Someone rings a bell, a real one, and the crowd begins a slow circle dance. Not everyone joins. Some clap, others pass out, folded cakes wrapped in cloth. You receive a second one, this one savory. Onion thyme, a hint of aged cheese. Warm, chewy, and slightly charred on one edge. Perfection. A nearby baker notices your appreciation and beckons you over. Her hands are flour white, her apron streaked with berry. She tells you that in her grandmother's time, folded cakes were used to deliver messages. During times of war or famine, women might bake pleas for help into cakes or warnings or family secrets. The codes were simple. A pinch of salt here, a twist there, but meaningful to the trained eye or tongue. You help her roll a fresh batch. The dough is soft, yeasty, warm from the fire. She shows you how to fold it with care, layering in stewed greens and chopped chestnuts. A good folded cake tells the truth in silence, she says. It holds the story until someone bites it open. Someone laughs behind you. It's a man selling sweetened wine from a barrel cart. He claims his cakes are better than hers. A mock rivalry ensues. He offers you a taste. His version is filled with pears and almond paste drizzled with honey. Decadent. You decide not to pick sides. You sit near the bonfire, cake in one hand, cup of warm wine in the other. The smoke curls upward in slow spirals. Children play with sticks. Someone sings a local ballad, the kind with 10 verses and no real ending. You notice the baker again now, speaking with an old woman holding a folded cake wrapped in linen. They exchange a few quiet words. Then solemnly, the old woman places the cake into the embers of the bonfire. A hush falls. This is part of it too, letting go. Some cakes are meant to be eaten. Some are meant to burn. The air is thick with scent. Flour, ash, wild mint, and the faint salt of tears. You think of the cakes you've eaten, the ones you've shared, and the ones that were never meant to be touched. You think about messages wrapped in dough, waiting for the right teeth to understand them. You toss your last crumb into the fire and watch it vanish. Then you stand shoulders dusted with flour and step back onto the road. The fields ripple gold and green around you. A folded cake festival behind you. The next story ahead. You wake to the soft sound of bread being torn. Somewhere nearby, someone is already awake, already hungry. The morning mist curls like wool around the branches above you, and the sky has the hesitant blue of a medieval prayer book. Another day, another step along this strange, flour-dusted path of peasant pancake tales. Today, your feet lead you toward a town whose name is lost to history, but whose reputation lingers like a warm crust on a skillet. This was once upon a time a place of secrets, culinary secrets whispered over churchyard fences and hidden behind pantry doors. You arrive just in time for the Feast of St. Mildred. The town square is modest but alive. Children dart between donkeys and barrels, and an old woman stirs something thick and golden in a cauldron that smells unmistakably like toasted oats in old butter. At first you assume it's porridge. Then someone ladles it onto a hot slate and flattens it into a thin circle. A pancake, but not quite. This you learn is a griddle cake laced with dried nettles and bits of fermented apple. Eaten in spring, it was believed to cleanse the blood and strengthen the knees. You try a bite. It tastes like someone caramelized a meadow. And now a historical fact for the morning medieval herb-laced pancakes weren't rare. In fact, many regional varieties acted as both food and medicine. Recipes would call for wormwood borage or even powdered ground ivy, not just for taste, but for spiritual and digestive protection. Your oddity of the day. In some monasteries, monks would inscribe pancake batter with prayer symbols before flipping. It was believed that this made the cake holier, safer to eat, and possibly less likely to upset your stomach. Did it work? No one knows, but it gave everyone something to talk about between matins and breakfast. Here's your scholarly question. Were these herbal cakes a sign of genuine belief in food as medicine, or simply a clever way to mask the flavor of poor grain? Some argue that monks and peasants alike truly trusted in the healing powers of herbs passed down orally. Others believe it was a matter of necessity when barley turned sour and rye became ergot-tainted. Anything green seemed like a good idea. As the morning moves on, the town square becomes a theater. A traveling friar reenacts the story of a pancake that healed a knight's sprained wrist. Nearby, two children compete in a flipping contest using wooden paddles and disc of bread. The winner receives a honey-drizzled blessing cake, a disc so sweet it sticks to your fingers long after the bite is gone. You settle on a bench beside a butcher's apprentice, who swears that his mother once made a pancake so savory that a bishop offered her a silver coin for the recipe. She refused, of course. You don't trade soul food for shiny metal. Later in the day, you visit the town's tiny chapel. Behind it is a humble garden where violets and leeks grow together in chaotic peace. A novice nun offers you a folded herb cake wrapped in cabbage leaf. You thank her and eat it by a low wall, watching bees bumble over thyme blossoms. The cake is warm, slightly bitter, and impossibly grounding. As evening drapes the town in lavender light, you are invited to one final pancake ritual. A circle of townsfolk gathers in the square, each holding a small cake. A priest offers a short blessing, and then, in perfect unison, they break their cakes in half and toss one piece into the fire. An offering they explain to St. Mildred and to the spirits of forgotten kitchens. One man whispers that his grandmother claimed to see a ghost take form in the smoke once a cook from centuries ago smiling through flour-dusted air. You nod. Stranger things have happened, like the nettle pancake. The embers glow. Someone begins to hum an old song about wheat and stars. You close your eyes and rest your head against a sun-warmed barrel. The road can wait till morning. The morning air is sharp with dew and the scent of firewood not yet lit. You rise from a pallet of straw and wool bones, aching in that familiar medieval way, and find yourself at the edge of a field where something strange is happening. Villagers are gathered not for labor, not for worship, but for pancakes. You inch closer, trying not to crunch too loudly on the frost-tipped grass. In the center of a worn circle of dirt, someone has erected a flat stone slab over a low smoky fire. And next to that slab, a large wooden bowl of batter, the color of cream and oats. But it's what they're doing with the pancakes that makes you stop. They're folding them. Thick ones, thin ones, round and slightly square-edged ones. all gently lifted from the hot stone and folded once then again. Folded pancakes, you learn, are the specialty of this village's end-of-harvest ritual. Each fold represents something: a wish, a memory, a prayer, a piece of gossip. That last one is whispered with a wink. You're handed one by a boy no older than 12. It's warm, slightly overcooked on one edge, and smells faintly of leek and smoke. You fold it as they do, once, then again. You whisper a secret inside. Someone behind you chuckles. You are now part of the ritual. The folding of pancakes wasn't limited to this one village, you later learn. In regions across Europe, especially in rural France, in Eastern Europe, folded or rolled pancakes often carried symbolic weight. They could be handed to travelers as edible blessings, carried into the fields as protection charms, or hidden in rafters to encourage fertility of crops, animals, and occasionally luck with in-laws. Our historical fact of the day: in 15th century Brittany, pancake folding was part of seasonal charms. One practice involved placing a folded galette under the bed of a newlywed couple on their wedding night for fertility, or perhaps just to keep the rats entertained. The point is, pancakes had potential. Now for the oddity. In parts of Hungary and southern Germany, certain pancakes were folded with things inside them: notes, charms, even strands of hair. These were then given in secret to lovers, enemies, or members of the clergy. The message inside could range from heartfelt to horrifying. One documented case involves a folded pancake discovered with a dead bee inside. No one knows what it meant. Probably don't cheat. You sit now among the villagers, chewing through the edges of your folded pancake, which has grown pleasantly soggy from steam. There is music, a one-string fiddle and a badly tuned pipe, and there is laughter. A woman tells you her folded pancake contained the wish that her goat would finally learn to behave. Another says she folded in a memory of her first love, who once mistook sheep dung for mushrooms. It was apparently a turning point. Scholars disagree as always. Were these pancake foldings proto-folk magic? Some argue yes, the act of baking, folding, and eating creates a cyclical ritual. Others say it's just rural boredom paired with a good excuse to use up eggs. You wander toward the edge of the crowd and find a small table where children are drawing in ash. Circles crosses a rough attempt at a horse. One girl draws a pancake with wings. She tells you it's to help her dreams fly faster. You nod as if this makes perfect sense, which somehow it does. Later, a story is told around the fire of a folded pancake that refused to unfold. The villagers claimed it was cursed, or perhaps enchanted, or maybe just left out too long and hardened into a spiral. Either way, it now hangs from the rafters of the village granary as a talisman against bad weather. Someone begins to pass out honey. It's local golden and with a slightly minty aftertaste. You drizzle it onto another pancake and fold it quickly before the bees notice. Time stretches as pancakes come and go, folded and refolded. Each one carries something invisible: a story, a wish, a superstition. You begin to realize that these rituals weren't about the pancakes at all. They were about holding something, an idea, a moment, or a memory, and eating it, digesting it, letting it become part of you. Just as you prepare to leave, the oldest woman in the village grabs your sleeve. She tells you not to throw away your last folded pancake. She nods at your satchel. Keep it, she says. You'll know when you need it. You don't ask questions. Instead, you slide the still warm folded cake into a cloth wrap and tuck it beside your walking bread and dried apples. It might be your lunch. It might be your luck. You wave goodbye, your fingers sticky with honey and superstition. The road bends ahead. You go on wondering how many folded wishes line the paths you've taken. You arrive just before dusk, guided not by roads or maps, but by the distant scent of nutmeg and burnt syrup. A traveling merchant pointed the way with a sticky thumb earlier this morning, and now in the valley below the village glows golden with torches and fire pits. There's a fair in progress. But this isn't just any fair. This is pancake night. The air hums with chatter and lute music. You pass under a makeshift arch of twisted vines and colored ribbons. Children dash by, their cheeks painted with circles, pancakes, presumably, while elders sip cider and reminisce. The smells are dizzying: spiced honeywood ash, dried fruits rehydrated in wine. A woman with a pan bigger than your head flips something that hisses and sizzles. A man beside her tosses coins into a bowl, grinning each time she lands a perfect fold. You watch as one of these creations lands on a broad green leaf and is handed to a girl who bites in and lets out a laugh. Her face is soon sticky with syrup and pride. Tonight's pancakes aren't simple. They are celebratory theatrical. One stall boasts orange blossom water imported from a faraway land, possibly a lie. Another offers stuffed varieties, one folded over candied turnip, another filled with soft cheese and pepper. A banner reads, "Taste the moon, flat, golden, and yours." You bite into your first one. The texture is stretchy, almost like custard in a cloak. The filling is apricot and sage. Your mind goes silent. Then it claps. Tonight's historical fact: fairs and feasts often featured experimental pancake-like foods. In fact, early fairgrounds in medieval France and Germany had entire zones devoted to frying things, anything that sizzled, puffed, or flipped. Pancakes weren't just food, they were entertainment. But here's the weird bit. Some of these festival pancakes weren't edible. Clay pancakes painted with crushed berries were sold as love charms. Others were used in mock duels where contestants tried to slap each other silly with oversized flour cakes until someone yielded or laughed too hard to continue. And now the academic conundrum: were pancake festivals forms of social inversion? Did these lighthearted events allow peasants and artisans to temporarily upend the normal order, flipping not just batter, but roles, hierarchies, and expectations? Or were they simply what they seemed: sweet, silly fun, meant to distract from long winters and harder truths? A minstrel begins a tale about a pancake so large it needed its own donkey. Children howl with laughter. An older woman tells of her great-uncle who once tried to propose using a pancake ring. It burned his hand, but she said yes anyway. The firelight dances on faces. Your hands are sticky, your heart is warm. A younger man sidles up beside you. Did you know, he says, that some monks used to judge pancake contests? They wore blindfolds and took their roles very seriously. The Abbey of St. Maurice had a 10-year winning streak until they were disqualified for adding quince wine. He winks and bites into a spiral-shaped cake shaped like a snail. You make your way through the crowd collecting stories and crumbs. One man insists that if you eat a pancake under a new moon while standing on one foot, you'll dream of your future spouse. Another believes pancakes are naturally magical, needing no spells, only butter. The evening winds down. A small choir sings a lullaby about a lonely frying pan waiting for company. Children begin to doze off on their parents' shoulders. You find a bench by the fire where a man is carefully drawing circles in ash with a twig. He tells you this is a sacred shape, the circle. Pancakes, he insists, are symbols of wholeness, of time, of hope that comes back around. Some say he whispers that pancakes are a prayer. Thin as they are, they hold everything: hunger, joy, memory. You nod. You don't want to leave yet. You stay a bit longer, watching embers fall like stars and listening to quiet laughter fade into the night. Eventually you stand. The path ahead is shadowy but inviting. And in your pouch, 2 small folded pancakes wrapped in cloth. For the road, for the story. You step away from the fire, but the warmth lingers. You continue up the hill toward the edge of the village, where an old storyteller beckons children with an iron skillet in one hand and a riddle in the other. What flips but never falls, he calls. What carries sweetness in circles. They giggle, tossing guesses, and he rewards them with tiny almond cakes shaped like crescent moons. You sit near the back and listen. His tale begins with a cobbler who made pancake shoes. Not edible ones, mind you. He just pressed the soles in cast iron pans to honor a lost love who made breakfast every Sunday. His shoes always smelled like butter, and people said he could walk into any room and calm even the angriest soul. He was also terrible at weddings, since someone always tried to eat his boots. You close your eyes and imagine the scent of those souls, partly out of curiosity, partly because someone nearby is grilling honey apple fritters in bacon fat. Your stomach shifts. Again. The storyteller wraps up with a bow. The kids cheer. You rise to thank him and notice a quiet corner where a few women are carefully arranging pancakes like tarot cards. Intrigued, you wander over. One looks up and smiles. Would you like to know your future? You nod. She flips a small wheat cake, then another. Each has symbols etched into the top with a hot iron. One shows a river, one a basket, one a broken ring. She studies them with the gravity of a bishop. Then she whispers, "You'll go far, but not always forward." You blink. That's cryptic. She grins. So is syrup. Someone laughs. The smell of cloves hangs in the air. A baby coos. Somewhere in the distance, a cart creaks toward tomorrow. And in this moment, your journey doesn't feel lonely. It feels warm, circling, sweet. You tuck the words into your memory alongside the folded pancakes in your pack. Tomorrow is still a road away, but tonight it tastes like sugar and ash and laughter. You leave behind the scent of barley loaves and cider vinegar. The wind now carries hints of something saltier, sharper, and oddly nutty. The terrain is changing, too fewer meadows, more scrub. The path winds past low stone walls patched with moss and scratched with age-old initials. A shepherd nods as you pass. Somewhere sheep are arguing, but you are thinking of cheese, not the lush wheels of cheddar or the delicate curls of brie. No, your thoughts drift to something humbler, chalkier, and surprisingly fragrant. Medieval peasant cheese. Though perhaps it's not quite cheese, more like a blend of curd paste and prayer. It always started with milk, or something that used to resemble milk. Goat, sheep, cow, whatever was giving. Then came time, patience, a linen cloth, and a stubborn refusal to waste anything. Coagulation wasn't science. It was guesswork. Sourness, temperature, and your grandmother's nose were the only real tools. Soft cheeses dominated the peasant table. Why? Because aging cheese required time, space, and resources most peasants didn't have. So instead, they made quick, fresh cheeses, clabber-pressed curds or white cheese, ready within hours or a day. Tangy, sometimes gritty, often wrapped in herbs or pressed between stones. Eaten with dark bread, wild onions, and the occasional apology. Today's historical fact: in 13th century England, cheese was so vital that it appeared in wage contracts. Laborers were paid in bread ale, and cheese no coin. This wasn't generosity, it was strategy. Cheese gave calories, protein, and a whisper of comfort, especially when the bread was 40% bark. Now, for something odd, some peasants made cheese from almond milk. Yes, almonds. On fast days or in monastic kitchens, animal milk was off limits. So they soaked, ground, and strained almonds, turning the result into a pale, fatty, cheese-adjacent paste. You might call it a spread. They called it salvation. Monks excelled at this. Some even flavored it with rose water or herbs to make it taste less penitential. Which leads to our scholarly question. Did medieval almond cheese inspire modern vegan cheese? Some argue yes, it was refined, deliberate. Others say no, it was about obedience, not ethics. Perhaps both are true. After all, nothing screams culinary innovation like pretending your nut paste is camembert. You pause beside a wayside stone and let your pack rest. An old woman emerges, seemingly from the moss, and offers you something wrapped in a leaf. It's pungent, soft, and flecked with tiny green seeds. Fenugreek, maybe. You bite. It crumbles like old snow, but the flavor lingers, tangy, sharp, a little wild. Cheese of the land. No label, no preservatives, just memory and microbes. She sits beside you and tells of cheese used in spells. Not love spells, though that too, but for protection. Leave a curd at your doorstep, she says, and bad spirits will pass you by. Toss one into the fire, she adds, and read the way it hisses. In her world, stories and cultures, both culinary and microbial, keep things running. A fiddler joins, young, barefoot, grinning. He swears by smoked curds he once ate near the coast, hung above herring fires until they tasted like regret. Horrifying, he admits, but oddly addictive. He offers a tune in exchange for your last bite. You agree. His song is mostly about a cow that refused to be milked unless flattered. The wind shifts. You thank them and walk on. As you go, you find yourself thinking of cheese not as food, but as ritual. A thing made quietly in corners. Something shaped by hand and hope. Something shared, not shown off. The opposite of modern charcuterie boards. You pass a stream and wash your fingers. Cold, clear water. A reminder that even monks, those masters of theological loopholes and almond curd, had to scrub their molds with silt and patience. Just before twilight, you spot a shrine carved into a tree trunk. Stones ring it like silent witnesses. Berries, a crust of bread, and yes, a pale curdy lump, an offering. For luck, for thanks, just in case you nod. Not to the cheese, but to the hands that made it. The sun lowers. A bat squeaks. You pitch your little tent beneath an ash tree. Dinner is simple, a crust smeared with something tangy and herbal. You chew slowly. Owls call in the distance. History, like cheese, ferments quietly. And sometimes it smells a little weird. The wind shifts as you cross the next ridge, and with it comes a scent that stops you in your tracks, like fried fat and nutmeg collided in a monastic kitchen. You follow it half wondering if you're hallucinating. After all, you've walked through meadows and woodlands for hours with only a small pouch of dried pear slices and a heel of bread to your name. But the scent is real, it's guiding you. You come upon a wayside gathering a modest camp where four nuns in travel-worn habits crouch around an iron pan, balanced across stones. They look up not startled but amused. One gestures for you to sit, another flips something golden in the pan. It's crisp at the edges, flecked with dried herbs and layered with something that glows faintly in the firelight. It's a pancake, but not just any pancake. This one's been folded, brushed with oil, and stuffed with what smells like walnuts, rosewater, and cinnamon. Your stomach whispers a prayer of thanks. You learn quickly that these are pilgrimage pancakes made with ingredients bartered or foraged along the road. They're not luxurious, but they're crafted with intention. Each fold hides a blend of symbolic and practical meaning, nourishment, yes, but also layers of memory, ritual, and fellowship. The nun serving you explains that folded pancakes were sometimes used as edible letters carried to distant abbeys, then unfolded by curious monks like parchment. Once she says her abbess received a folded barley cake from a long-lost friend. Inside a sliver of quince and a single sage leaf, a message only they understood. Tonight's historical fact: folded pancakes appear in medieval records not just as food, but as tokens, gifts between lovers, bribes between farmers, or peace offerings after feuds. Some recipes instructed cooks to wrap the soul inside the flour. Poetic, absolutely. Ambiguous, very. The oddity: some regions believed folding a pancake in a specific direction, left over right, not right over left, could bless a journey or curse it. There are stories of bakers being blamed for bad harvest because of careless crimping. Imagine a world where your folding technique decides your social fate. And the scholarly debate: were these folds truly communicative, or are we projecting symbolism backward onto simple survival food? Some culinary historians argue we've romanticized the pancake. Others point to religious manuscripts and court banquets, where recipes were noted with terms like enclosed for reverence. Who knew a snack could have subtext? You take another bite. The interior is warm textured with ground chestnut and something pleasantly tangy, maybe fermented apple. The outer crisp gives way to softness, like a story wrapped in parchment. The nuns talk as they eat, their voices light with laughter. One recalls a tale where a cook disguised political messages in the folds of festival pancakes delivered across borders, eaten before suspicion could follow. Another claims her aunt used to seal hers with wax made from beeswax and thyme, not to be opened until All Saints' Day. You don't know whether to believe them, but you want to. The fire burns low. Someone adds a stick of bay wood. It crackles and the scent of spice smoke drifts through the clearing. You're handed a small cup of broth, earthy warm, and laced with leek. It anchors the sweetness of the pancake. Balance, after all, was a medieval virtue. After a while, you help fold the next batch. Your first attempt is laughably bad, more like an omelet with trust issues. The nuns pretend not to notice. You get better. By the fifth, your fingers move with practiced ease. There's rhythm to it: spread, fold, press, seal. Like writing, like remembering. You think of all the stories hidden in folds in food and clothing and history. You think of all the messages carried not in ink, but in flavor. And you realize you're part of that story now. A footnote in a footpath, a traveler who folded pancakes with strangers by firelight. One of the nuns begins to hum. It's a tune you almost recognize, something old, maybe Roman or Breton. The melody wraps around the trees like another kind of fold sound, hiding inside silence. Eventually they pack their things. The pan is wiped clean, the ashes scattered. You thank them deeply. They bless you not with grand gestures, but with smiles and a final pancake folded twice. You slip it into your satchel like a letter. As you walk on, the moon rises behind you. The path ahead gleams with dew, and somewhere in the folds of your coat, in the folds of your memory, a warm flavor lingers. A folded pancake soft with story. You arrive just before dusk at a hilltop shrine where the trees lean as if eavesdropping. The wind here whispers sideways, brushing past your cheek with the smell of moss and wood ash. At the shrine steps, a woman kneels, her veil shimmering with oil from lantern smoke. She's frying something thin on a stone slab. You already know what it is. You can smell the nutty warmth of buckwheat, the slight tang of onion. The aroma tells you it's another pancake, but this one isn't for dinner. You watch silently from the edge of the grove. She flips it once, then places it in a small clay bowl, leaving it at the shrine door. No bite, no blessing. Just a whisper for safe passage. Shrines and food were old friends long before churches took over. In villages across Europe and Asia, food offerings to spirit saints or the forest itself were common. And what was easier to give than a simple pancake, flatbread was humble. It was portable, and it could hold meaning without needing gold leaf or sermons. Tonight's historical fact. In parts of Eastern Europe and old Celtic regions, pancakes were offered to house spirits or guardian deities at the threshold. If you failed to leave one during key festivals like Imbolc or a local saint's day, it was said your butter would curdle for a year, or your dog would talk and reveal your secrets. That last part may be a regional exaggeration. You approach slowly. The woman doesn't seem startled. She offers you a seat beside her. The fire is low but steady, fed by coals from her travel lantern. She speaks in a mix of French and something older. You catch only fragments, but it feels like prayer disguised as gossip. She tells you about a mountain village where pancakes are fried on rooftops to welcome spring, about how they used to throw the first one over their shoulder. If it landed face up, the coming season would be kind. If not, well, you ate it quietly and didn't tell anyone. The oddity of the night, some shrines had strict pancake etiquette. In parts of rural Italy and Greece, the offering had to be turned exactly 3 times for the past, present, and future. If you turned it 4, it was considered greedy. Turn it twice and the dead might follow you home. The scholarly wrinkle, were these rituals remnants of pagan offerings, dressed in the clothing of Christianity? Or were they simply local traditions layered with meaning over time? Some say the flatbread was always sacred, representing cycles, renewal, and warmth. Others argue it was merely convenient, flat, cheap, and easy to leave behind. As the woman finishes her tale, she takes another cake and sets it between you. This one is savory herbs, maybe nettle tucked inside. It's warm. You eat with your fingers. No need for words. The stars begin to show bright and sharp like pins in velvet. Somewhere down the hill, bells chime. Evening mass or just a herder calling home the goats. In the hush, it's all the same. You ask her where she's headed. She says only where the wheat grows loudest. You share the last of your dried apples, and in return, she offers a sliver of hard cheese that tastes faintly of violets. Then silently, she places one last pancake on the shrine step and disappears down the path. You linger. The offering steams gently in the moonlight. You don't eat it, you don't touch it, but you understand it. It's a wish, a bribe, a goodbye. And just before you leave, you do the same. You tear a bit of your own bread and place it there. Not because you believe, but because something about the quiet insists you should. As you descend the hill, you wonder how many pancakes have gone uneaten, how many have fed mice or birds or winds, and whether that was always the point. Tonight you fall asleep under a sky stitched with stars, your breath scented with fried herbs and firewood. The shrine flickers behind your eyes as you dream of round foods left behind with love. The road by now has become familiar, not in detail, but in rhythm. Dirt crunches under your feet like the same stale crust of every town's end. But there's a curious shift in the air, not in temperature or wind, but in scent, the sugary burn of something caramelizing on open stone. It's not firewood, it's not meat. It's something thinner, lighter, sweet dough perhaps, or syrup. You're near a market again, but this one feels different. As you pass through the first row of tattered stalls, you don't see carts piled with root vegetables or wheels of cheese. No, these vendors sell sweets, rows of brittle sugar threads, twisted wafers, and odd glossy cakes that glint in the late afternoon light. You've stumbled into something between a fair and a sugar dream. A boy offers you a sliver of a thin disc. It's translucent and crackles between your fingers. You nibble. It tastes like honey scorched with rose water. Unusual, fleeting, a little too delicate for hunger, but perfect for curiosity. You nod. He grins. These are not just candies. These are oblata dulcis honey wafers. And today's lesson, sweet and sticky, is about how such a fragile thing could carry the weight of ritual memory and mischief. In medieval Europe, wafers weren't simply snacks. Some were sacred, used in communion or offered during religious feast days. Others were celebratory, given during weddings or baptisms, passed hand to hand with whispered blessings. And some, like the ones crumbling between your molars, were ambiguous. Not fully sacred, not fully secular, just sweet enough to cause suspicion. Today's historical fact: by the 13th century, wafer makers had their own guilds. In cities like Paris or Cologne, these artisans perfected the delicate craft of pouring batter onto hot patterned irons, creating edible laces of sugar and flour. It was a serious business. In some places, only guild members could legally produce wafers for public sale. But here's the odd detail: some wafers were coated, not in flavor, but in form. In certain towns, patterns pressed into the wafer's face told stories of saints, seasons, or secrets. Some wafers even acted as tokens, bearing symbols exchanged between lovers or political allies. Imagine a love letter you could eat, and eat too quickly if nervous. And now for your academic itch: did wafers blur the line between the sacred and the profane? They were, after all, shaped like the communion host, but flavored with spices and sugar, decidedly not divine in church terms. Some scholars argue that this caused tension in religious communities, especially when street sellers peddled them too close to cathedrals. Others say the association with the sacred elevated their status, making even poor folk feel if briefly connected to something holy. You walk further into the square. Children chase one another with melted sugar on sticks, laughing through sticky cheeks. A woman stirs a pot of boiled honey, carefully skimming foam with a leaf. Her daughter presses circles onto hot stones using a carved wooden disc. Each is identical, yet no two feel the same. A monk passes by, not the stern kind, but one with syrup stains on his sleeve. He raises his hand in greeting, then drops a wafer into your palm without a word. It's warm, soft at the center, faintly floral. You eat it in 2 bites. You learn that some pilgrims carried wafers not as food, but as votive offerings. Left at shrines or sacred wells, these delicate discs were meant to melt slowly, like whispered prayers dissolving into the wind. Others carried wafers laced with herbs, anise, lavender, even rue, as edible wards against plague or misfortune. The crowd begins to hum with music. Somewhere a flute begins, joined by clapping. A low table is cleared. On it, someone begins stacking wafers into a delicate tower. Children gasp. A breeze almost topples it, but a quick hand saves the top disc. Cheers erupt. You smile and sit near a stone bench. A girl beside you breaks a wafer into quarters and hands you a piece. Made by my grandmother, she says. She says if you eat it under moonlight, you'll remember dreams. You ask if that's true. She shrugs. Only if you want to. It's not moonlight yet, but you eat it anyway. Around you, sugar dances in the air. Not literally, but it might as well. The market smells like burnt clover, fig paste, and the final hint of something smoky and buttered. You could fall asleep here. As twilight settles, vendors begin to wrap their sweets in parchment, tucking them into boxes woven from bark and twine. Children beg for just one more, but even they know when the feast ends. You take one last wafer for the road. This one is plain with no pattern, but its edges curl slightly like a smile. Not all snacks shout, some whisper, and tonight's whisper is sweet. You wake early before the light has stretched itself fully across the frost-bitten ground. The coals in your campfire still whisper warmth, and there's a fine mist hanging over the meadow like forgotten breath. You've slept near the edge of a village this time, a quieter one nestled between 2 hills that seem to lean toward each other like gossiping monks. You hear nothing but the occasional distant bleat of a goat. But your thoughts are already on pancakes, not the ones you've already seen. No, these are rarer, stranger. You've caught whispers of them before, folded, filled, and exchanged in silence. This morning you've come to find them. You wander into the village slowly, like fog might drifting between stone walls and under arched eaves. No one stops you. Perhaps it's the cloak. Perhaps it's your practiced air of knowing where you're going. You don't. And then there, a baker's shed, barely more than a timber frame lean-to, but the smell of yeast, heat, and iron griddle is unmistakable. A woman with hands like garden forks is shaping batter into rounds. You ask softly about the folded cakes. She doesn't nod. She doesn't answer. She gestures. To the back, through the curtain of drying herbs. Behind the veil you find them. Pancakes, but not like before. These are folded, thick, golden brown, and stuffed. One opens slightly at the seam, revealing crushed walnuts and something red beets or dates. Another oozes a pale sauce that smells faintly of leeks. There's even one dotted with slivers of dried mushroom and wild garlic. You're offered one. You sit, you bite. The warm pocket splits gently between your fingers. Inside a soft blend of mashed chestnuts, salted cheese, and just a wisp of nutmeg. It's startlingly luxurious and humble at the same time. The kind of thing that makes you close your eyes and forget what century you're in. Here's the fact of the day: folded pancakes were a medieval staple in more ways than one. Known across Europe by dozens of names, blend crispel fladen, they weren't always sweet. In fact, the savory ones dominated. Folded pancakes served as edible envelopes for whatever scraps, roots, or pulses a family could gather. And here's the quirk: some medieval folded pancakes were not meant to be eaten at all. They were charms, superstitions folded in dough. A crespel left under the floorboard might trap a fever spirit. Another tucked under a newborn's pillow could prevent colic. Yes, pancakes as ghost traps. Your modern medicine cabinet is suddenly feeling underqualified. And now for the scholarly wrinkle: were these folded forms the ancestor of today's dumplings? Some food historians argue that the transition from pancake to pierogi, or to the pasty, or the empanada, represents one of the earliest forms of food portability. Others caution against direct lines. After all, flour water and heat will inspire repetition across cultures. Still, it's tempting to think of your pancake as part of an ancient lineage of travel-ready snacks. A child peers in her eyes, catching yours. She's holding one of the mushroom-filled pancakes and giggles before ducking away. The baker returns. She places another folded cake before you, this one still warm from the iron. The filling spiced apple rosemary and a curious tang of vinegar. You take a bite. It's challenging, but fascinating, like history itself. You're told that these pancakes were often made the night before feast days or market journeys. Easy to carry, easy to hide. And when folded just right, they could even contain tiny notes, messages pressed into dough for secret delivery. Who needs parchment when you've got batter? You imagine it: two lovers separated by duty, passing a folded crispel at the village square. Inside, a sliver of onion skin inked with a promise: fold, fry, deliver, eat, and maybe blush a little. Outside, the village is waking. Smoke begins to climb from chimneys. A cart rumbles down the path. Somewhere a bell rings. You buy 3 more folded pancakes, wrapping them in cloth. They are heavier than you expect, and comforting. As you walk away, you feel their warmth against your chest. You stop by a hedgerow to eat one more, this one with crushed lentils and mint. It tastes like spring somehow, even though the frost hasn't lifted. And there in the dirt beneath the hedge, you find a flattened coin, or what looks like one. It's round, golden, and etched with what might have been a bird. A pancake, a token, or maybe both. You pocket it, you walk on. The day stretches ahead, folded like your snack. Who knows what it contains? You hum a tune you don't quite know, you smile, and the road gently curves forward. By the time you reach the last village on your pancake trail, dusk is settling like flower dust across the fields. The road curls through a patch of damp forest, opens into an orchard, half picked clean by birds and children, and finally reveals a hamlet clustered around a squat stone chapel. The bells are silent, but the windows flicker with the soft yellow light of something cooking. You are tired, not the tired of walking or listening or waiting, but the kind that sits behind your eyes and pulls at your ribs. A satisfied tired, a story-shaped tired. Your shoes are crusted with weeks of travel. Your hands still smell faintly of rye and ash, but your stomach, it is humming. The inn is no more than a long hall with rushes on the floor and a cat in the rafters. A woman with windburned cheeks serves you a wooden bowl without asking. The contents a final pancake, round, soft, and topped with what might be bruised figs, a dribble of something sweet, possibly wine-reduced, possibly juice from last year. This is your final entry in the Pancake Codex. The pancake here at the edge of your journey tastes like everything you've seen. Earthy like barley, tangy like spoiled buttermilk, spiced somehow with memory. Tonight's fact: in times of scarcity, some medieval cooks flavored pancakes with moss or ground bark, not as punishment, but as ingenuity, a culinary pivot, a refusal to let celebration die just because the pantry was bare. And the oddity: in certain parts of Eastern Europe, pancakes were buried with the dead, not as food for the grave, but as a final comfort, a warm farewell, a sign that even in silence, the language of pancakes carried on. The academic wrinkle is the pancake, a metaphor. Some believe it is a symbol of cycle and rebirth. Round like the sun, humble like the earth, versatile as the human spirit. Others say it's just breakfast. And maybe both are right. As you chew, you watch an old man in the corner heat a flat griddle by candlelight. He presses something into the batter with the end of a twig. You squint. It's not a flower, not a nut, it's a coin. Symbolic or practical, hard to tell. You think of all the pancakes eaten in secret, in silence, with laughter, in grief, across borders, across time. You think of pancakes as passports. The woman at the inn lights a stub of candle near your table. Its light trembles with your breath. Somewhere outside, an owl questions the night. You are full. You are home. And in this sleepy village where no one asks who you are or why you came, your story closes like a pan lid. The pancake trail ends not with a feast but a flicker. And still the warmth remains. You made it. Through flour-dusted kitchens and whisper-thin crepes. Through secret batter shared at midnight and holy days that tasted just a little too good for piety. Through jokes tucked inside folded pancakes and rumors baked into ash cakes on monastic stones. You've wandered past carts and markets, leaned into fireside stories, and maybe you've grown a bit hungry yourself. But now the pan is cooling. The batter's all gone. And outside, the wind has stilled into that lullaby hush that only arrives after the last story's told. You close your eyes. Maybe you can still feel the warmth of that festival morning when a whole village smelled like cinnamon and smoke. Or maybe you're remembering that odd little tale about ghost pancakes left at crossroads. Or perhaps you're simply smiling at the thought that something as humble as flour and oil could carry centuries of longing laughter and quiet rebellion. Rest easy now. History isn't always about kings and swords and dusty scrolls. Sometimes it's just about breakfast, or something like it. So let your thoughts drift. Let the crumbs of old stories settle. And know that the past is still here in the scent of a frying pan, in the hush of a shared meal, in the echo of a pilgrim's slow, sweet bite. That's the story for tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.